So welcome to the March meeting of the Nevada County Camera Club. I'm Mike Shea. I'm the president of the club, if you didn't know who I was. We've got a few announcements. We've got a very full session tonight. So got to kind of keep things on time. So I've got a couple of announcements I'd like to make. First off, Rachel, our past president, is traveling, and she asked that I, on her behalf, thank the artist committee members, all of you that were participating in the Granucci Gallery show for making such a successful opening. Hopefully a lot of you were there. It was really wonderful. It was really fun. We have a bunch of shows going on. So the Granucci exhibit is good until April 20th. So if you haven't been to the Center for the Arts to check that out, go check it out. The theme is a celebration of water. It's really a nice show. At the Seven Stars Gallery on Spring Street in Nevada City, the Art of the Burn show. So it's a show about Burning Man with photos and other artworks. That will end Friday. So if you haven't been there, you might want to check that out. Shelley Carlisle has Awakening the Sacred Feminine at the Nevada City Winery until April 7th. So you have another week or two to go check that one out. And John Sievert has an exhibit at Edward Jones on Brunswick, because I know there's so many Edward Jones offices, it's hard to know where, which one it is, but it's the one on Brunswick. And John's show will be there till the end of April. Photo walks. So we're going to have 2 photo walks. The first one is Saturday, April 13th. It's at 7 p.m. It's a Nevada City night walk, and we'll meet at Robinson Plaza in Nevada City to stroll through downtown Nevada City to photograph the nightlight, historic buildings, and whatever the heck you want to photograph. And then there'll be a second photo walk on Saturday, April 27th at 9:30 a.m. That's at the Empire Mine State Park. And you'll meet at the entrance for a walk through the historic grounds and gardens. There's a $5 entrance fee. Yeah. So, please join us on that. Kathy, I know you had an announcement. Where are you? She's not here. Okay, well, as I remember, Kathy, I think what she told me was she had 2 openings for her Bodhi trip. And so I don't know any of the other details, but if you contact Kathy Trujillo, she could fill you in, but she still has openings for that trip. And Allison, come on up.
There we go. So I have my first solo exhibit in May, which is kind of wild considering I made my first ever print a year ago. But it's going to feature my travel photography and a lot of my astrophotography. So if you want to live vicariously through this kooky 23-year-old, come see the faces and places I've captured. It's at the Courtyard Suites. There's a reception on May 4th from 5:30 to 7:30. Should be quite a party. Courtyard Suites in Grass Valley.
Yeah, whoever's somebody's on, I guess, on Zoom and they're not muted, so please mute. Yeah, and the Courtyard Suites is right by Pine Street down there. So it's a really nice venue. Any other announcements? Come on up, or you can do it from there if you'd like, or you can come up here.
I'm a guest. Actually, I stop in occasionally here and there. I'm doing a show on the Himalayas. I've been traveling there for over 7 summers and shooting there and taking tours and visiting the Dalai Lama's teachings and the monasteries. So I'm doing a show Saturday night at 7 o'clock, Nevada City at Inner Path.
Where is that?
It's right next to the Crazy Horse. Oh, okay. It's on the bottom of the street. It's kind of a odd shaped bottom of the street. It's a brick building. It's kind of a yoga studio and spiritual store. Douglas Horton. Yeah. 7 o'clock, 7 to 8 p.m. This Saturday, the 30th. Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? Come on up. Okay, so some items for sale. Anybody else? Yeah, Mike.
All right, so let me pull this up here. So a couple updates for field trips. We've been adjusting the schedule based on a few changes to a few things. Just a reminder that the Ananda photo walks aren't a club sponsored event, but if you wanted to get there in the evenings, there's 2 trips that are being run by Kyle James, a local photographer, been a club member in the past. There's one on Saturday, April 20th, and the other one on Friday, April 26th from 5 to 7:30. It's the only way that you can get into the Ananda Tulips after hours, and it's the only time you can bring a tripod is with Kyle's trips. Cost is $35. So I'll tell you about that. We may try to organize a last minute group during the day at some point for some of us to go in. And it all depends on how the bloom happens here in the next couple of weeks. So no set date. I just wanted to inform you about those other trips that we had talked about in the past. I am planning, I canceled the Astro photo trip in March because of weather. I'm going to try again in April for an arch over an oak tree down in Smartsville. I'm setting that for Sunday morning, April 14th. It's going to be at 2 a.m. So we got to get out there. We're going to have a little bit of moon overlap and then the arch. So it's that time of the year where it's super early. I know that, but if you want to get the arch, you have to get out there and get out there early. So you can either stay up late and stay up all night and sleep on Sunday. That's why I would do it on a Sunday so you can catch up on your sleep. But we're going to try and run that in April. The other change was to the wild horses trip. I had said the 21st. David came back from Africa, and we decided to move it forward one day to Saturday the 20th. Okay, so the wild horses trip over in Carson City, like we've done the last couple of years, David and Bill are going to be the leaders for that. That's happening on the 20th. It'll be an early trip, getting up at 6 a.m. and carpooling from here over there. So that trip is coming up, and I'll have the signups for that. I'll send an email around so you can sign up for that. Then the last 2 things are about wildflowers. It's almost wildflower season, pretty much close. Table Mountain is pretty close. I had a couple of early reports on that. So if you want to go. If you do go, please tell me what it looks like. Again, we'll try and plan a Table Mountain trip, but it's going to be, again, probably a week's notice on that. So I don't know when, sometime in the next 3-4 weeks, maybe as a group, we can try to get out there together. Okay. So no more, just know that that's coming. The other note, if you're not familiar, Buttermilk Trail down at the covered bridge is closed. If you didn't hear that. So the trail got washed out.
There a couple days ago, sign, like parking lot said it was closed. It was not closed.
Did you walk? Were you able to walk to where the it's still washed out though, right?
Yeah, but
Okay, this is great. Okay, so it's great to know.
Now that said, I thought the point stopped, but so did.
Okay, well, great. Okay, so folks on Zoom who didn't hear that, apparently people are still going out there breaking the law. But what's the wildflowers like right now? What's the situation? No lupin, anything blooming? Some poppies. Okay, so it's not quite peaks. Yeah. So again, if you see stuff, just let us know what the bloom's looking like, so appreciate that. Yeah. All right. That's all I got for you. Who's up? Thanks.
Hi, yeah, I'm Hanu, the membership chair. I'm just going to give a quick numbers. So we are 137 members current. We have 1 new member, Gary Sweener, but he introduced himself last week at the meeting. We have 6 guests here tonight, so welcome to all the guests. And that's what I have. Thank you.
Hey, it sounds like that's it for announcements. So welcome again to all of our guests. I'm Grace Farrig, for those of you who don't know me, the Vice President. And I am very excited to introduce our speaker for tonight, who, along with his late wife, Maureen Gallagher, is the owner, co-founder, editor, and publisher of the award-winning Lenswork, one of today's most respected and important periodicals in fine art photography. With subscribers in 72 countries, his impact on fine art photography is truly worldwide, and his long-running podcast on photography and the creative process is heard over the internet by thousands every day, and Lenswork is currently in its 31st year of publication. In addition, he's himself a fine art photographer, a workshop teacher, and the author of 9 best-selling books on photography and creativity, including, to name just a few of them, Looking at Images, The Creative Life in Photography, Letting Go of the Camera, and Photography and Creativity. I could certainly go on, as all of that is just the tip of the proverbial iceberg, but I know we're all eager to hear more from him than we are from me. So let's go ahead and give a very warm Nevada County Camera Club welcome to our guest speaker, Brooks Jensen.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Grace, for that introduction. I'm excited to be here. Wish I could be down photographing the flowers with you, but maybe in another time. Let me start by sharing my screen here. And hopefully, now, can everyone see lenswork.com?
Yes.
Okay, good. Let me begin with just a short introduction to who we are, who Lenswork is, in case some of you are not familiar with it. Some of you, I suspect, are. Some of you maybe even subscribers. But for those of you who aren't, we do basically 4 publications. In 1993, we started a print publication. We're still sending that out. Matter of fact, number 167 just mailed last week. We also do a computer version and a tablet version. And in January of this year, we started something called the Lenswork Bonus Editions, which is a digital PDF version of featuring one body of work from something that's come across our desk that we think is really terrific and we want to share. We've, like I say, been publishing for 31 years. We started off with black and white because that's my personal background. But we started doing color work and have learned an awful lot about color. And I'm glad to do color now for 10 years or so. I know those of you who are color photographers are laughing at me now. We also publish a series of monographs. We just are mailing this week a color monograph from Al DeVal of Acadia National Park. So if you're interested in books, there's that. We also do an annual book. Some of you have participated in this, I know. Every year we call it the Lenswork Community Book Project, where you don't have to be a member, but if you send in work, you get a copy of the book. So that's fun. I'll talk more about that in just a little bit, and lots of other books. So we're an extensive print publisher. We also have a huge website called Lenswork Online. That's a membership website, literally terabytes of information. And I also have a personal website called Brooks Jensen Arts. And every day I post a new picture that's sort of a what didn't work, what did work, what I liked, what I didn't like. So for those of you who want to, have a little inspiration with your morning coffee, that's the purpose of that. And then finally, I publish my own work, personal work, in a project called Kokoro, which is Japanese for the heart of the matter. It's a PDF publication anthology. I'm going to be talking about some of the content of this in the examples that we get into, so you'll get a chance to see some of these later on tonight. The topic of the evening is, I'm titling it Beyond the Single Print, and it's inspired primarily from this guy. His name is Alvin Toffler. Some of you may remember Alvin Toffler. Alvin Toffler was a futurist, and he wrote a very famous book in the 1960s called Future Shock. And it was a worldwide bestseller. And his thinking was to try to predict, obviously that's what a futurist does, try to predict what will be coming our way in the future. And he was pretty doggone accurate. And one of his famous quotes is this one: "The illiterates of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." And for those of us who have been involved in photography for a while and have seen the digital revolution come upon photography, this certainly describes the world that we live in. I remember personally thinking that once I had the Ansel Adams and Minor White zone system down, I probably would know everything I would ever need to learn in photography. And boy, was that wrong. So here's an example of what I mean by this. Photography has been defined for you and I, and people are doing what I will characterize as personally expressive fine art photography. It's been characterized as this sort of idea. You first go out and make a beautiful, magnificent, magical, inspiring, fantastic photograph. But that's usually not where it ends, because a print on photographic paper is a little flimsy and it's hard to display and etc. So we put it in a white mat board, and that has been defined for us by previous generations as a certain kind of mat board that we absolutely must use. Whatever you do, don't vary from this, or the galleries don't want to have you have their work in their exhibition space. It has to be a white mat board, it has to be 4-ply, it has to be bevel cut. Don't try black mat board or blue mat board, or you'll violate some, I don't know, cosmic rule or something, I guess. And then you number it and you sign it. This obviously is not Harry Potter, but it illustrates the point of the magical print. This is Ansel Adams Clearing Winter Storm, but and he probably did make about 1 million of them, I think. But this is the method that we have all used in photography for generations now, literally going back 100 years, is this presentation. And then we take this magical, wonderful print and we put it in a frame and we hang it on the wall. And we all do this. I do this. This is how I learned photography. I cut my teeth with the single magical print in the mat board paradigm. And I suspect that a lot of you do this. We all do it even to this day because it works. It's great for the single image. The problem is that not everything fits that paradigm. And that's the first thing I want us to really zero in on tonight, is that just because it's worked in the past doesn't mean it's necessarily the only option for moving into the future, that there's lots of other things we can do. So the question is, what do we need to unlearn and relearn in order to not get stuck in the one and only presentation method that has come before us? And so I'd like to take you through a number of ideas tonight. And not that I'm proposing that we not do framed, matted wall art prints. We all do. We all love them. It's great. But that's not the only option these days. And if I can open up some thinking about possibly some other things that might be of interest to you, that would be good. Here's the first thing I want to get across, and it's what I call the disappearance of the priesthood. And priesthood is, I've never come up with a better word for it, but basically it's this: Ansel Adams or the great masters of photography, they were sort of like the priests of the process. They understood all the chemistry, they understood the ins and outs of making a great piece of artwork, and they were on a level that most of us could not achieve. because we didn't know what they knew. We didn't have the experience that they had. And so there was a tier between people like you and me who were trying to do our best in photography and then the superstars of photography. But there's a couple of things about that have changed. Now, here's a picture of Ansel Adams from, gosh, I've now forgotten. I think it was in the early 70s. It was a photograph taken by a friend of mine, Stu Levy, at an Ansel Adams workshop that took place in his house. And he's showing these prints of his. And notice not only the print that he's holding above his head, but the other images that are on the wall. They're 11 by 14s, I think. It's hard to tell from here, but they're certainly bigger than 8 by 10 and probably smaller than 16 by 20. So I'm assuming they're probably 11 by 14s. And in his day, when you could make a really stunning 11 by 14 print that was sharply focused and had beautiful and wonderful tones and great content and composition, man, it was worthy of applause because it was such a rare and unusual feat to produce something that looked that good. But that's not true anymore, because now everybody can do that. You can probably go out and spend an hour photographing and come back and make an 11 by 14 print that's spectacular without even thinking about it. So what used to be technically extraordinary is now sort of normal. And if you and I hold up let me go back one. If you and I hold up an 11 by 14 black and white print, no one's going to applaud unless the content is mind-bogglingly special, because it's not a technological achievement anymore. What used to be a very complicated thing to do, to make an 8 by 10 gelatin silver contact print like this Pepper number 30 from Edward Weston, now we can print out these 30 by 40 inch prints that are tack sharp and they're gorgeous and they got beautiful colors and etc. It's not enough, I guess is what I'm saying. It's not enough these days to produce something that in yesteryears would have put you at the top tier of photographers in the world. Now everybody can do it. It's not that hard. So technologically, the issues have been solved. What does that mean? It means that our role as a photographer has become something other than merely, I say that as though it's easy, but merely mastering techniques. This really came home to me 10 or so years ago, 15 years ago, in publishing lens work. We published a wonderful body of work from a guy who was attending the big Catholic church in Chicago, and that church decided they wanted to produce a book of their wonderful church. And so they announced to the congregation that they were going to open this contest up to the congregants to see who would be awarded this job of photographing their church for this book. And the guy we published decided this sounded fun. So on Wednesday night, this is his story. I interviewed him. You could hear him tell the story. It's really funny. On Wednesday night, he bought a camera and spent Thursday night and Friday night going through the instruction manual. He'd never had a camera before in his life. He said, by Sunday morning, I pretty much had it down. And I said to him, you realize the arrow you have just shot in the heart of all of us old photographers that have spent a decade mastering our skills. But he was right. He mastered it in a weekend, and he did absolutely magnificent work, and we were delighted to publish it in Lenswork. And that shows how things have changed today. It's still fun to produce a magical print. It just isn't necessarily as special as it used to be. And so now we have to accept this new role. And the role I like to think of is that of seers. We have to become artists. And there's an old story about this that has to do with Edward Weston. And this is a picture of Edward Weston, and one of my favorites of his, one of the great photographers of all times. And Edward Weston was having a book published, and he received an envelope from the printer with some proofs in it for him to take a look at and to approve. And according to the story, which, by the way, I've confirmed with his grandson, told me this story is true, that Edward Weston received the envelope that was addressed to Edward Weston, comma, artist. And Edward Weston was not happy with this, because he was proud of being a photographer. Now, keep in mind, this is in the 1930s, when photography is still struggling to be recognized and accepted as a legitimate art medium. And so when he had completed looking at the proofs, he put them back in the envelope, where he crossed off the word artist and wrote the word photographer, making this positive statement: I'm a photographer, and he wanted to emphasize that. And I think Edward Weston was probably right in his day and age. I'm not sure it's right for today. That today, one of the great challenges we need to accept as photographers is the challenge of migrating what we do from the world of photography to the world of art. Because when we start thinking of ourselves as artists, that means we can produce wonderful images if that's what we want to do, but we can produce lots of other stuff if that's what we want to do. Artist is a much more encompassing term, I think, than just being a photographer. And besides, a lot of times, if you get introduced at a social event as a photographer, the first question you'll get is, do you do weddings? And of course, not all of us do. So what we do in our photographic life is we start amassing what I'll characterize as an inventory of work. And that creates what I call the problem with the pile of prints. And here's what I mean by that. Let's imagine that you have someone who says they would like to come over to the house and look at some of your photographs. You say, great, come on over. And so you pull out a pile of photographs and you give them this pile of photographs to look at. And they do something like this. They pick one up and they look at it and they set it over here. And they pick up another one and they look at it and they set it over here. And they look at it and they're examining your work, print by print, image by image. Or if you have a gallery exhibition, they're walking from one print to the next. The problem with the pile of prints is I don't think that's what's really happening. They're not just moving them from one to the other. When people look at a pile of prints, they will almost subconsciously, without even thinking about it, what they'll be doing in their mind that they wouldn't show to us is something more like this. They pick up a print and they look at it, they say, I like that one. And they put it over here. And they look at the second one, and they say, I like that one too. And they put it over here. And they pick up the third one and say, this one doesn't thrill me to death, so maybe I don't like that one so much. What they would kind of like to do is put it over here to this side. Take all the ones they don't like and make a stack. Take all the ones they do like and make a stack. That's the problem of the pile of prints, because that kind of viewing tends to set up a thumbs up, thumbs down sort of scenario. And it really does this, of course, when you're showing work on Instagram or Facebook or some social media, is that photography has become in recent years this thumbs up, thumbs down thing. And I find this a particularly challenging thing for us photographers, because there's a philosophical basis to thumbs up, thumbs down, which is, I think this is a good photograph, or I think this is not a good photograph. That's what thumbs up, thumbs down tends to mean. Even if it's disguised in language like, I like this one and I don't like this one, It's based on the viewer's criteria of what the artwork is supposed to look like. But as artists, we're supposed to make a statement about what we want it to look like. And so there's a philosophical loggerhead here about whose opinion counts. Does the opinion of the public count because they're pushing you to make work that they define as good, or are you being an artist and trying to make something that brings people along with you? And so with that kind of fundamental scenario about looking at artwork, we find ourselves boxed into this corner. And the individual print is what promotes that. That's the key, is when you have an individual print for someone to look at, their natural response is going to be yes or no, up or down, thumbs up, thumbs down. But what if we can start thinking beyond the print? If you put together a group of images that tie together somehow to create a unified statement, then all of a sudden that mindset shifts. People are no longer looking at individual prints with a thumbs up, thumbs down kind of attitude, that instead they start looking at your group as your project as a whole. And the images either work together and say something that's more than, haven't I made a wonderful, magical photograph? You can say all kinds of interesting things. You can tell little stories. And so going beyond the individual print is the key. I first got onto this idea from this gentleman here. His name is David Bales, and he, with Ted Orland, they wrote a wonderful book called Art and Fear. And if you're not familiar with this book, I highly recommend it. I think anybody in photography will find the ideas in this book to be very, very useful, because it gets beyond the technical aspects of photography and starts talking about what it is that we do, what it is that we want to communicate, how it is that we want to engage this creative process that we're all involved in called photography. It's a very thin little book, and that's always a danger. Thin books are hard. And they pack more ideas into 130 pages than is it's amazing. And here's one of them. And I picked this up in a workshop that I did with David Bales. He proposed that every time we go out photographing, probably most of us don't come back with one picture. You go out, you find a place that's photogenic, for some reason it speaks to you, you dig out your camera, and you start making lots and lots and lots of pictures. And a good example of that for me was at a place called Fort Worden up in Northwest Washington. And it's an old World War I military bunker that has been turned into a state park. And the kids go in there and they write things on the wall, dirty messages and whatnot. And the park rangers come by and cover it all up with paint to make sure that all of that gets isn't visible. Well, I got fascinated with these brush things, these abstracts, and I photographed like 800 of them. That may be an extreme case, but I photographed it for years. I kept going back and seeing more and seeing more. And I have all these pictures. What do you do with them? Well, David Bales gave me the key. He said, when you have a big pile of prints of a project or a place or a theme or your vacation or whatever it is, take that pile of prints and divide it into two piles of prints along some criteria. So, for example, take all the ones that are vertical compositions and put them over here, and take all the ones that are horizontal compositions and put them over here. He said, and in the process of dividing your work, see if anything happens to you. And if it doesn't, if you don't have any revelation or anything, put them all back together, shuffle them all up again if you want, and divide them again along a different criteria. all the ones that have a shallow depth of field as compared to all the ones that have a very tremendous depth of field. Divide your pile of images, which, by the way, is easy enough to do in Lightroom because you can do a collection out of this thing, but you can also do this with physical prints just as well. See if anything happens to you when you divide them based on depth of field. If nothing happens, put them all back together in a pile, come up with another criteria. All the ones that have diagonals in them and all the ones that don't have diagonals in them. See if anything happens. Nothing happens, put them back together. All the ones that are dark in tone versus all the ones that are light in tone. David Bale says, no matter what you do, if you do this long enough, you will find a dividing criteria that will suddenly make the hair on the back of your neck stand up, and you'll go, oh, there it is. The project is buried in your images, in your huge volume of images, particularly those of you who are shooting digitally. In that huge volume of images, a project is probably in there, but you can't find it. It's needle in the haystack kind of thing until you add clarity by going through this little exercise. And when you do that, you'll discover a project that's in your work. So I was doing that with all of these abstracts from Fort Worden in one kind or another, until eventually I had done, I don't know, maybe I'd have 20 different criteria and nothing happened. I wasn't getting inspired at all until I saw this image, which is just a horizontal swath of paint. And I thought, that looks like a Chinese calligraphy brushstroke for the number 1 is actually that we write our 1 up and down. They write their 1 left and right. And I thought, I wonder if I have any other images in this stack that look like Chinese calligraphy or something. And I started finding that I had an image here and an image there. Not very many of them. I had lots and lots of them that weren't like that, but I had some that were. And this photograph that you see here was one of the walls where someone had just walked down the way and made all these brushstrokes. And to me, it looked like a scroll of Chinese writing or something, or Japanese writing. And so I developed this project called Wakarimasen, which is Japanese for I don't understand, because I don't read Japanese. And I know this isn't Japanese or Chinese calligraphy, but it kind of looked like that. So Wakarimasen, the search for meaning in an unknown language. And I had a project, and I wrote a little introductory text with lots of translations for the word I don't understand down the left. And then here's the group of images that I found that went together as a project. Now, I haven't talked yet about how they're going to manifest themselves in terms of media, but it could be as simple as you mat and frame all these and hang them up as an exhibition. That's a project. Now you've got a title, and it's a group of pictures that are intended to be seen as a group. And someone might look at one of these images and say, well, it doesn't fit the group. So that might lead to a thumbs up, thumbs down kind of thinking. But they probably won't. At least that's been my experience, that they'll tend to look at this as a group. Now, they may like the project or not, but they'll still look at all the images and look for the connections and the threads and the things that join them into a group. So that's one of the first things we can do, is look for groups of images in the already massive number of images you probably have in your Lightroom catalog, and put together a project. Now the question becomes, how are you going to produce it? In what medium are you going to produce? And this leads to point number 5 I want to make. I'll title Off the Wall. This is the kind of thing that I found my photographic turf in. When I started photography in the early 1970s, like so many photographers, the first person that just blew my socks off, of course, was Ansel Adams, because wowee. And so I wanted to be the next Ansel Adams. So I tried to do everything Ansel Adams did. The problem was I just wasn't finding myself connecting the way he did with Yosemite or any other place, because I didn't live in Yosemite like he did. But my grandfather was one of these machine shop people. He had a machine shop. I grew up in his machine shop, and obviously I loved my grandfather, and so it was all that fond childhood memories. And this is what I found I wanted to photograph, was greasy guys and tools and machine shops and etc. But I discovered fairly quickly that they don't look that good about the fireplace. No one wants to purchase a piece of artwork that's a greasy tool shop photograph and display it. And so the question becomes, how am I going to present this? This subject matter itself does not lend itself to the white mat board and the bevel cut and the frame and the gallery exhibition and et cetera. Particularly if it's a selling gallery, because galleries survive based on selling work, and most people sell work because they're interested in decor. They want to hang it above the fireplace or somewhere. My work didn't fit. So I had to start searching for a place to show it. And I was involved in a group very similar to your group, I suspect, where we would all bring work. And from time to time, I would bring one of these greasy tool machine shop guys and show it. And they would all say, well, why are you taking a picture of a pair of pliers? Or, who was this guy or whatever? And this individual here that you see was the door opener for me, because although I love the photograph, it was when I talked about him to my local photo group that people became excited and interested. And I realized that it was this guy's story and my story about meeting him and what our conversation was. That was what turned the photograph into something that was more interesting than just a picture of somebody. And so I started adding text to my images. And maybe you can or cannot see the text at the bottom, so I'll read it. He rolled a cigarette, spit, swore, and then asked me if I wanted some tea. And when people heard that kind of story about each image, they connected with the photographs much more deeply than when I just showed them what somebody looked like. So I put together a bunch of these as individual prints, enclosed them in a little art paper cover thing that you see here on the left, so that they were, I call them folios. They're kind of halfway between a book, which has lots of images and is bound, and a piece of fine artwork that gets matted and framed and put on the wall. This is a folio is kind of halfway in between. So like a book, it has many images, but like a gallery exhibition or something, it's a pile of prints. And I've made these now for years. Lots of people are making them since I talked about this in Lenswork. But it's a really fun way to put together a group of images. And you can make your own paper covers. You can buy different kinds of covers, clamshell boxes, and etc. But you put together a group of images. You may or may not want text. Could be color, could be black and white. You can make it lots of different sizes. It's a fun way to explore your assets, all the photographs that you've made. You can put them together in some sort of a group that communicates a story. So here's a couple of other examples. The text on this one says, "These pumps bring back a lot of nice memories," he said, and then quietly walked off and left me standing there wondering. So I was just set up to photograph this pump. It was beautiful shadow. I liked the light, etc. And this guy just walked up and said this. He didn't introduce himself. We didn't have a conversation. That was it. And I thought, what a fascinating moment. So I real quickly wrote that down, knowing that I would use it somewhere in this project. From the folio, I've evolved into other kinds of media, however. One of which is this, and this is called a chap book, CHAP, chap book. And it's basically a handmade artist book. Let me go back one to this. The problem with the folios, it's a great method for sharing a group of images, 10, 15, 20 images, something like that. It's a great medium, but once someone opens it up and starts looking at the prints, they can shuffle them and they may not go back into the container when they're done in the same order that they came out with. And that's true with a portfolio box. It's true with this kind of thing. So each image, each piece of paper, if you will, has to be sort of self-contained, where I had some projects where I definitely wanted to have a sequence with more text. And you can see in the photograph on the right, this handmade, hand-sewn 8-page little photo book called a chapbook has more text, has a little bit of a story. Well, once you start thinking in those terms, you can have all kinds of fun because you can tell interesting stories. So here's the 8 pages of a little bit of work that I did in Japan a number of years ago. And the title of this project is called Protection from Evil. And that's what these angry looking guys and dragons and all this kind of stuff, there you find them at Japanese temples, and they're there to scare off the evil spirits. And so they look like angry guys, but they're really good because they're protecting everybody who's in the temple. So these are the 8 pages of that project. Notice just a little paragraph of introductory text on the second page, and then just pictures. And then at the end, the lower right-hand corner, that's a special page that's called a colophon page that basically describes what the project is. I put, that they're inkjet prints, and I use this kind of paper and this kind of font and all that kind of stuff. And that's where I sign the name of the person who has it, etc. So this is an example. Here's another one from an afternoon's worth of work in a market in China, an open air fish and meat market, which was simultaneously fascinating and a little scary, but it was beautiful photography. And so I put this together in a project called Gratitude. Now, so you can see what I'm trying to get at here is that a photograph is a means of communication, but it's capable of doing so much more than just being matted and framed on the wall. I still do that work, like I say, but there's other things that open up doors that are just as fun and can be different than just a really beautiful picture, a stunning image. So the question becomes, once we start thinking about this, keep in mind, Edward Weston and the idea of photographer or artist, once you start asking these kinds of questions, you find yourself up fairly quickly against this idea of how important is the print, the physical, the paper thing. Well, I guess technically aluminum too now these days. But anyway, because when I grew up in photography, if there wasn't a print, there wasn't a photograph. I mean, well, slides, maybe, okay, I guess is an exception, but 99% of photography was a print. And if you didn't have a physical thing, then there wasn't anything to show. But now we live in the age of the internet. We live in the age of the PDF. We live in the age of Zoom meetings. And it can be helpful to change our thinking subtly. Are we photographers? That is to say, are we print makers, or are we image producers? And if we're producing images, then maybe the print isn't as critical for some projects. I first got onto this idea, oh gosh, this was in the mid-90s. I ran in across this project that was done on a DVD or a CD. I'm not sure. I can't remember which it was. It was by Pedro Meyer, wonderful, wonderful Mexican photographer. He's got a great website called Zone Zero, if you're not familiar with that. He did this really fantastic project of his parents struggling. His mother got cancer and his dad was taking care of her. And then while he was taking care of her, he got cancer, and then they were taking care of each other. And he told this wonderful story with voiceover, all still images fading from one to the next. It was really a touching and moving thing. And I thought, not a molecule of paper in sight, but yet this powerful story of these people in their lives, his parents and whatnot. And I thought, that's it. We need to think about what it is that we're producing. And sometimes it might be appropriate to think about a medium other than my chosen medium, which was the print. That maybe there's another way to do things. And once you start thinking about that, the question becomes, well, what is the content that we're creating? Is it just the magical pretty picture, the Harry Potter Ansel Adams thing, or are we doing something else? And then I ran across this idea that's a very powerful one, and I call it story without a plot. Charles Dickens, who everybody knows, started his career as a newspaper columnist. I don't know if you know this, but anyway, he was hired by the newspaper. Because he was a wonderful creative writer, the newspaper sent him out onto the streets of London and said, go write us little 1,500-word stories, if you will, that simply describe a scene. Now, keep in mind, the newspapers back then didn't have photographs because that technology hadn't been invented yet. And so in order to communicate what something looked like, it required a writer with an imaginative vocabulary and talent for writing, and that was Charles Dickens. And he published a bunch of these, and they're called Sketches by Boz. That was actually the title of his very first book. And he would find, for example, a hackney coach stand where people would, like a taxi, they would catch a coach to take them somewhere. And he would simply describe it. There was no story. That is to say, it didn't have a beginning, middle, and end. So it didn't introduce people and then have a bunch of action and then have a conclusion somewhere. It wasn't that linear. It wasn't that story. It was just a picture in words, some of which were illustrated when he published them in book format, as we see here. They were pictures and words of stuff he saw wherever he traveled. And I thought, gosh, isn't that exactly what we do? We find something that's interesting and we capture it with our camera, and maybe we capture a number of them, but maybe there's a way to think in terms of stories without a plot, stories that describe something, maybe even have action and motion, but aren't necessarily a morality tale, if you will. So I went to the rodeo in the town where I live up in Lyndon, Washington. They have an annual rodeo. And I had applied to the officials to be able to go down into the rodeo area and take pictures. I wanted to, take rodeo pictures. And they said, well, we've already given out all the press releases that we have available. So no, sorry, you can't. So, but you can photograph from the stands all you want. And I thought, okay, what am I going to photograph from the stands of the rodeo? And then it dawned on me, if I could stand in one place, wherever my seat was in the bleachers, with my telephoto zoom lens and zero in on everybody's brand new white hats, which is a big deal in rodeo country, obviously. You wear a white straw hat at these kinds of events. I could put together a little project that was rodeo hat. So here's one of these 8-page projects, has, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 images, and that's a little story. It's like Dickens painting a portrait of something that's beyond an individual image and tells a very small story, but hopefully in kind of a fun and entertaining way. And I had to find some text for it. And so, in the immortal words of Lyle Lovett, you can have my girl, but don't touch my hat. It became the perfect text for this little project. So you see what I'm getting at. Here's another example of this. I was in China photographing on a very, very cold, blustery day in the middle of winter. And I was jumping out of the cab, making a picture, jumping back in the cab. And suddenly this guy came out of this building and said, through my translator, obviously, I don't speak Mandarin. He said, come on in and get warm. So we got out of the cab, went in, and here were these guys sitting around this little tiny stove. And come to find out, this was the village store. And so they would come there in the middle of winter and get warm with this thing. And so here, I don't know if you can see my mouse. Hopefully you can. In this guy's hands right here, he's got a little tiny book that I always carry with me that shows the examples of the kinds of photographs that I do. And so I use this as an introduction. And I asked them after they had read the book and, knew a little bit about what I was doing photographically. I asked them if I could take their picture, and they said yes. So I snapped this picture, and then this guy here, second one from the right, just looked at me with this intense gaze, like he wanted to have his portrait made. And, when you get a guy like that with that kind of look, you're going to make his portrait, right? But notice he's got a wooden hand and he's got a glass eye. And I was dying to ask him, what happened? How did you get this? But I didn't speak any Mandarin. He didn't speak any English. So all we had was this moment of connection, a moment of connection. And I thought, that's the story. The story is the moment of connection. So I put this together in one of these little handmade artist books that has a few images. I later found out, as you can see in the lower right, they get together every day to play to gamble, it's to play mahjong and whatnot. And but anyway, you can see this picture of this guy with this moment. The text in the story is about traveling to this fishing village, having these guys invite us in, having this guy look at me for this moment of portraiture. And that's the only connection that we had, was this moment. And yet, through the power of photography, he's a part of my life for the rest of my life, is that moment of connection. So that's what it's all about, is the moment of connection, whether it's connecting with a landscape, connecting with a railroad, connecting with an abstract. It's about those moments. And if you can share those moments with people, then I think that's an interesting strategy. It's a different strategy than sharing a pretty picture with someone. That has its place too, but sharing a moment is kind of a magical thing that we photographers could do. Okay, that leads me to the idea of structure. The enemy of art is the total lack of limitations. That's one of my favorite quotes from filmmaker Orson Welles. And here's what I mean by structure in photography. I heard about what do you want to call it? I guess it's a bar challenge. The apocryphal story is that someone approached Hemingway in a bar. And Hemingway was known, of course, for making very short, terse sentences. That was his writing style. And he was constantly trying to boil it down. It kind of sounds like what we do, right? And so he's boiling it down. So someone came up to him in a bar to bet him that he couldn't write a story in 6 words. And Hemingway said, of course, I'll take the bet, because of course I can do it. And he said, here's my story. Baby shoes, for sale, never worn. Now, isn't that just fascinating? There's a whole website now about 6-word stories. People have been doing this. There's thousands of them. It's a fascinating way to spend some time when you just are looking for some cheap entertainment. But it all started with this Hemingway bar bet that he couldn't do it, and he could. And I thought, wow, that's an interesting idea. If Hemingway can write a story in 6 words, why couldn't we photographers borrow that idea? And so we put together a few stories of 6 images. So here's 4, and this is my late wife's uncle Kenny, and we were at a family reunion, and I was photographing his, greasy tools, and he's one of those guys. And Kenny came walking out to the garage one day when I was out there photographing, and he was kind of dressed up in a real nice shirt and a nice pair of slacks and his nice shoes. And he said, "I suppose you're going to want to be making a portrait of me now." And I said, "Of course, Uncle Kenny, of course." And he said, "I know exactly how I want it." And he sat down here and posed, and I made this portrait. And I thought, well, that's the core image in a 6-image story of Uncle Kenny. And after Uncle Kenny and Aunt Palma both passed away, we happened to be at their house when they were cleaning things out. And in the bottom of the closet, we found their Sunday shoes. And I couldn't resist taking a picture. So that's my little 6-image story of Uncle Kenny: the shoes, the portrait, and these 4 images here of his place. That's him playing cards. Well, that was so much fun. I thought, why not do that as a Lenswork community book project? So we said, put together 6 images that go together with a title, have to have a title, and optional text. If you don't want to have text, that's fine. If you want to have text, you can. And people sent in their 6-image stories, and they were fascinating. And we published a book, and it was so much fun. We did it 4 years in a row of 6-image stories. So here's one from a photographer named Jim Hans called The Fog of Desert, which is, I think, beautiful. They're very unusual processing techniques, but they hold together, don't they? As a group, they feel like a thing, like they all fit together. Here's one by photographer Lev Simring called Dogs in the City. Again, 6 pictures of dogs. Now, how many pictures did he make of dogs in the city? I'll bet he made hundreds, but these are the ones he edited down to for this little 6-image story. And obviously in the book, these 6-image stories were presented on 6 pages of the book. So each image got a full page. There's one called Alien Architecture. You get the idea. You can do little 6-image stories. They're not so big that they're an oppressive project like a book would be, where you have to have 80 or 100 or 150 images or something. You can have a lot fewer images than that. But 6-image stories are all kinds of fun. And you can either make them, put them all in one picture frame, like what would that be? Hexic. I don't know what the word for that would be, but 6 images in one frame. You could make 6 picture frames on the wall. You could make a handmade artist book, like one of these little chapbooks that you print on 2 sides of the paper and sew it together. Or you can just present it in your website or a PDF as 6 images. Well, that led to a further idea of maybe only 3 images. But in this book, in 2022, we put together these 3-image collections called trilogies, and everybody had 2 pages. And so on one page, they had to have a vertical, and on the other page, they could have 2 images that could be both square or rectangular and square or whatever. But do you see what I'm trying to define as structure? The Orson Welles idea that the structure helps the project move along. So 3 images on a two-page spread in a book made perfect sense. Well, when I did the book layout, I looked at things like this that are 2 pages, two facing pages, and I thought, well, wait a minute. With digital photography, why couldn't we print these 3 images on one piece of paper, mat that in a white mat board and frame it and hang it on the wall? And with 3 pictures, maybe we can do things that are really interesting, that might even be more interesting than one picture by itself. Now, any one of these pictures would probably be fine in the frame. They're lovely pictures. But if you put 3 of them together, they do a little more of a storytelling job. And it's something that we can easily enough do now that we're thinking digitally. So there's some ideas for you to do things that are different than framed on the wall, probably with the assets you already have in your Lightroom catalog, or however you organize your images, your contact sheets, if you're working in the wet dark room. I've made this statement many times, and I think it's absolutely true, that every single one of us could be productive creatively in photography for the rest of our lives with the assets that we've already photographed. If we just spend a little time mining in our Lightroom catalog for potential projects, for connections, for threads. There's lots of things that we can do. And why not? It's a lot of fun. And it gives us something different and unique and that touches people on a deeper level than here's a pretty picture that is above the fireplace. So that's my thoughts about moving beyond the print. Hopefully, I've left a little time for questions if we have questions.
Yes, thank you so much. That was an amazing talk.
Thanks.
I hope you can hear some of the applause. I'm sorry that you can't see us. There's about 50 or so of us here, so, and then some people online. So that was really inspiring. And we do
Good.
have time for questions. Just give us a second while we get the microphone ready. Oh, thanks, Mike. Anyone raise your hand so that Mike can bring the microphone to you, because in order for Brooks to hear, you need to speak into that. Anyone got a question?
Hi. So who is the audience for the various, whether it's a portfolio or the books, these being sold, as opposed to the pretty picture over the fireplace where somebody somewhere theoretically is enjoying it and it's being seen.
Right.
So that's the tension between different ways of trying to prepare your work is ultimately we want it to be seen, not necessarily to make money, but to be enjoyed and seen and shared.
Well, the handmade artist books are real easy because lots and lots of people have books. I mean, and we all have some books that we keep in our house. We've got them on the coffee table, whatever. When people come over, they can physically see these things. I do sell them, and I'm amazed at that. As a matter of fact, take the one of Uncle Kenny. This is a family member, and I primarily did this thinking that it would be of interest to the family members. And I made up enough of those handmade artist books so that everybody in the family could have one and remember Uncle Kenny. But what surprised me was how many people were interested in buying it because they would say, I've got that guy in my life. It's not Kenny, it's somebody else, or there was a guy down the street that I knew like that. And so it connected with people. And I think for me, that's what's really important is connecting with people. How they connect that's varied. You could take Uncle Kenny and put him on the wall in a gallery and connect that way. There may be a picture of the farm that might fit for the pretty picture above the fireplace too. So it's not, well, I'll put it to you this way. If you build it, they will come, right? We learned that from Field of Dreams and Kevin Costner and all that. That's what I have found to be true. If you make something that's a finished thing, like a folio or like a chapbook or a blurb book or and gallery expert, if you make it, if you finish it, there will be an audience for it. How big that audience is, you never know. How many people will it connect with? Hopefully someone, but that's not my primary purpose for doing artwork, is to make money. My primary purpose is to experience what I can gain from creating the work. And then when it connects with someone else, I may never even know about it. My primary means of distributing my work, that is to say, the number one means, is I publish them on my website at brooksjensenarts.com as free downloadable PDFs. They're downloaded from all over the world. And I'll get email back from people saying, gosh, thanks for sharing that. I've shared it with all my friends here in Jakarta. I would never have an exhibition of prints in a gallery in Jakarta, but I can connect with them via the internet through PDFs. The physical connections are more difficult, more regionally limited, but you'll get inventive and find ways to connect, and you will. It just happens.
Any other questions? Next. Well, I actually have a question. So
Sure.
I actually love those the little books or chapbooks. And I know you said they're like handmade, hand sewn,
Mhm.
but can you speak a little more about the process? I'm assuming you weren't, or did you just yourself hand sew those and put them together? How do you create them actually? Like the actual process?
Yeah. Well, they all came about because of the invention of two-sided printing paper in the inkjet world. And because like a book, it has to have something on both sides. And so with the invention of two-sided paper, that opened up the possibility. Then what I did is I just drew a layout plan, if you will, that allowed me to put the 8 pages on two sides of a piece of paper, so that it can take one sheet of paper through the printer, and everything, when it gets trimmed and folded, is in the right place in the book. That's called an imposition, and it's a little tricky, but it's not that tough to do. But once you do that, then it's all cut, it's trimmed, and the only thing they're not done is married together, and that just requires a little bit of sewing. And I sew them myself. It's one of those mindless things
Very
that you
cool.
can do while you're watching TV.
Oh, that is very cool. Thanks for sharing. Any other questions? I see a hand. Oh, David.
So I like your comments about Hemingway and the 6-word stories.
Mhm.
And it really brings to mind, we as photographers are so often, we want to have so much in the photo, and we don't leave anything to the imagination of our viewers. And I thought that thought about the 6-word story and all of that really reminds me that, less is more.
Mhm.
And
It
I
can
really
be.
appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of fun too, because how many times have we come back from being out photographing somewhere, and we find we don't really have the above the fireplace image. We have a lot of nice images, but nothing that's, quadruple A plus plus plus, that's going to end up being matted and framed. So what do you do with all those images that aren't quite double A plus plus plus, but they're really nice images? Well, this gives you a way to use some of those images beyond the very best one. My experience is that the very best one is also dicey, because what you think is your very best one is based on your opinion as the maker. That's fine. That's ultimate power, I suppose, to make that decision. But somebody else might like a different image as their favorite. Well, if you put together a little project with 6 images, then you'll find that different people really fall in love with different images in the project. That really happens with the folios, where I put together maybe 10 or 15 images that, once they get out in the world, almost every one of those, I'll get an email back saying, that's my favorite. But if there's 15 images, there'll be 15 different favorites, sort of spread statistically evenly amongst all the people who've seen it. Beauty in the eye of the beholder, I guess.
We have time for one or two more. And also anyone online, I put a note in there, but if anyone online has a question, please feel free. Anyone else in here? All right, I think that is it. Brooks, thank you again so much. I hope you can hear
My
the
pleasure.
applause when everyone's clapping.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
It was
Go
such a
out there and
pleasure
make
to
some
have
art.
you.
Okay.
And we'll make sure to send out your information about how people can find you to our membership so they can follow along and with
Thanks.
Lens work and with what you're doing.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Hopefully I'll run into you folks out there somewhere.
Yeah, you're welcome. Come on over.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. So we're going to have our intermission now, just a few minutes, and then we'll get back together for our critique portion of the night.
How
Yes, this-
large is this?
Hmm?
How large is this?
The creature was about 30 feet long, about 15 feet high, give ballpark. And as you approach it, you hear a recording coming out of the beast's mouth. It says, "You're no good. You'll never amount to anything. Nobody likes you." And there's this vulnerable little boy in front, and you just really feel for him. And these two photos were made just after sunrise, early in the week. And then I went back 2 mornings later, go to the next photo. This is the official photo, the sharing moment. And this was just before sunrise. And the boy inside only lit up very occasionally. And I thought, well, I really want to picture the boy lit up. And so it was all lined up. The boy lit up when this man was here. And I said, "Sir, could you stand aside so I can grab a quick picture?" And he ignored me. And I said, "Excuse me, sir, could you stand aside so I can get a quick picture of the boy lit up? And then you can come back in." And he ignored me again. I thought, I think I have something to learn here. Something else is going on. And he paused another few moments, and then he stepped away, and the boy was no longer lit up. And he turned to me and he said, "When you hug the boy, the recording changes."
Yeah.
And he hugged the boy, and I listened, and the recording had gone to, "Everybody loves you. You can do anything you want to do." And I thought, oh my God, what a great art piece. And then he introduced himself, gave me his card. He's Halcyon. He's one of the world's most famous Burning Man journalists. And after the event, this was August, September of 2022, took me a few weeks to organize myself, but I got this picture to him and he said, "This is the best picture of all of 2022. I absolutely love this photo." And so we emailed a few times back and forth. And then the story ends on a sad note. The first week in October, Tigray Michelle Lively committed suicide.
Oh.
This art piece made many, many people cry during Burning Man 2022.
So people at home on Zoom aren't seeing this, they said. So I'm sure.
Let's go ahead and mention what it was made of.
The legs are stacked motorcycle tires. The scales, Desert, do you know what the scales are made of? Well, no, they were different. I think they were sheets of burnished metal to be copper colored. And then the thing had 4 red glass eyes on each side. Really fantastic art piece. I guess the Zoom people didn't see the photos, but.
Okay, that should have done it. Okay.
So did the people on Zoom hear my story but not see?
They would have heard.
Yeah, they heard my story.
All right, so then show the next image with. All right. Okay, thank you, Douglas.
You're welcome.
So we're doing the last month's favorites. Okay. So last month's favorites. Mother's Love by Bill Oskowski. Rainbow Ice on Banner Mountain of Tom Quinn. Why don't you come down here with this one? That would be very good. So I got this one. Well, I mean, you guys can all read it anyway. So architecture, interior of Domo at Siena, Jonathan Feingold. Birds, an artist palette by Ed Sylvester. Fauna, This One's Mine by Janice Rosner. Flora is Madrone Leaves by me, Mike Shea. Natural Landscape, Coal Canyon Falls After Much Rain, Eric Engels. Night Photography, You Can Lead a Horse to Water, but if it dies, you have to walk home, by Anita Kasparian.
That's wrong.
Uh-oh.
Allison.
Okay, it's by Allison Culp, but it's the name on the screen is wrong.
Yes.
Sorry about that, Allison. People, 22 Loses the Ball by Barbara Summers. Journalism, Junior Buckaroo by Lori Woodhall. Creative, The Trip, Ellen Davis. Black and White, The Waterfall Hunk by Chris Schiller. Color, Exuding Timeless Charm, Jonathan Beth. And Phone, Beach Finds by Laura Greenman.
I think we could skip some.
Missed the creative but realistic, or manipulative but realistic. We didn't see.
Probably missing.
Maybe the one.
I guess there, yeah, wasn't one. All right. So how about a round of applause for our favorite photos?
Okay, so now we move into the critique portion of the night, and our volunteer critiquers are David Wong and Tom Quinn. And just a reminder, their critique is based on their subjective opinion, and so just reminding everyone of that. Critiques are about 1 minute. We have about 90 images to get through, so just giving you guys the heads up that we probably will go over past 9 o'clock, but we will do our best. But if you need to leave around that time, totally understand. So without any further ado, we will jump into assigned subject, which was reflections. And the first one is Morning Reflections 2.
Okay, hello. So without further ado, Morning Reflections. This photo of the Sandhill Cranes works well for the assigned subject of reflections with the 3 Sandhill Cranes. But I enjoy particularly the 2 Sandhill Cranes looking in opposite directions. I think this has a kind of a painterly effect to the photo, and I think that comes out nicely. There's low light, and I think it was a fairly high ISO shot. Couple of thoughts come to mind, maybe just to make the nice shot even better, in my opinion. I think, let's see. I would center the image a little more around the middle of the 2 Sandhill Cranes. I think they're the subject of the photo. The third one is in the view, but the 2 in front are really the story. And I think, so if you center it, I think the empty space at the bottom and at the right could be trimmed a bit to make it more obvious what the story is. And if the photographer knew how to mask, I would mask the two cranes and bring up their levels a little bit more, and just to make them pop a little bit more, and you could leave the rest of it alone. Thank you.
And the artist is Bernadette Sylvester. Next, we have Tranquility.
Everybody hear me fine? Well, obviously, this is a kind of a pretty peaceful scene, and I always enjoy these simple reed reflections and often the interesting geometric shapes that they can sometimes form. Those sort of images usually work best for me when the water is more still than this, and we have a more crisp reflection to see those geometric shapes. Short of that, I definitely think some cropping would help on this photo. Much of the top, certainly those ducks way up top, are really not adding anything to the photo. You could cut out, I think, at least a quarter of the top of this photo and quite a bit on the right. Although those reeds on the right are somewhat interesting, if you crop way down from the top, I think you could crop way in from the right, pretty much just to where that little cool triangle is, or diamond shaped reflection is in the middle there, and have that be the right side of your photo. And leave the left, and I think you would have, to my opinion, a much more effective photo just in here without all this up here. Up above, let's see. Yeah, and you might even experiment with looking at an even tighter crop by removing some of the busy reed patch on the far left. And whether your resolution's good enough to do that and have that type of crop, I'm not sure. But there may be a really interesting photo, much smaller, just in towards the center of this picture. Thank you.
And the artist is June Anderson. Next, we have Special Delivery.
I like the tranquility of this photo with the view of the water, the mountains, and the clouds. I think including the reeds and the shore with the mailbox gives it a lot of depth from the foreground all the way to the mountains and to the clouds. The category of reflections, though, is not so well represented here, unfortunately. There is the humorous thought of the title, Special Delivery, with the mailbox set against the rest of the photo. I think the mailbox represents an interesting juxtaposition, but it would be best, I think, if you, for the sake of the category reflections, left out, since we don't have any reflections from the mailbox. Where the reflections are those more from the clouds. But it's a, it's a nice tranquil photo that I like regardless.
The artist is Eleni Prusa. Next, we have Cloudy Reflection.
Well, I think this is an excellent reflection image. Some might question the presence of that log cutting across, which is not part of the reflection, but I actually really like it in there. That diagonal slash from the lower right corner coming back, I think, as a dynamic element to an otherwise pretty but somewhat cliche tree reflection. I also really like the framing done here with leaving in the reeds and branches, providing some framing around the main feature of the tree reflection with the diagonal log. So nice job.
The artist is Gary Kartstaffner. Next up, Meadow Mirror Magic.
This really reflects well on the subject of reflections. It looks like it's an upside down view. I kept trying to turn my monitor upside down or standing on my head to look at it. Yeah, it looks like an upside down reflected view at Yosemite, and it's well focused. It has good exposure, well balanced from the top to the bottom. The only thing for me, I found it confusing with so much detail that I couldn't find anywhere to land my eye in this photo. I couldn't decide to turn it upside down or if it was post-process somehow for the reflections. It definitely interesting shot. I just don't know what to do with my eye. Sorry.
The artist is Tom Quinn.
Do I have time for rebuttal?
Oh,
We're
yeah.
already gonna
Yeah.
be here
Did
for a
you-
while,
Did
guys.
you turn your camera upside down?
No, I just turned the image upside
Oh,
down.
okay.
Those are all reeds in the sky that are actually at my foot when a photo is taken.
All right, next is Holiday Reflections on Oro Preto, 1890.
Well, when you think of the reflection category, this is certainly different. And my first look was, what am I looking at here in terms of reflection? And then it dawned on me, and the title helped out somewhat. But really beautiful image, beautiful, vivid color. Title helped out. Those round dots of color, and the photographer, if they're in the room, I'm sure can substantiate this, but the round dots of color apparently are the reflections. And the rest of it is a painting upon which those dots of color are reflected. And to me, those dots blend beautifully with the actual painting. I thought it was a very subtle but effective use of reflection and a good eye by the photographer to see it and capture it technically very well. Thanks.
And the artist is Bill Osowski. Next, Savannah Reflections.
Fits very well in this category. Has a nice, almost intentional camera movement feel to it, with the wind reflections added to the reflected view itself. There's a nice sense of color and the out of focus views to the image caused by the wind. For me, the bright blue cloudless area on the top competes with the rest of the image though, and draws my eye slightly away from the rest because I can't really see any waves or clouds in this area. Also, on the left, the tree with the red leaves and the brighter little tree trunk, I think also competes with the rest of the image because it just doesn't have something to balance against. But I like the image. That's just my feeling I was left with.
The artist is Suzanne Hambleton. Next is Loch Leven Light.
Well, this is kind of a classic shoreline rock and tree reflection. Many of us have taken similar or tried to take similar, but this one is very technically well done, crisp, perfect exposure throughout. Would I have framed it and cropped it slightly differently? Probably so, but that is so much of a personal choice in the eye of the beholder and the photographer. Don't have a lot of constructive criticism. I would say that it probably could use more vignetting, but that would just be for fun since I happen to know who took the photograph.
And the artist is Chris Schiller. All about the vignette. Next is Reflections at the Lake.
I think this is a very nice photo that carries the theme of reflections well. The off-center cropping works well for me. The sun being partially hidden by the tree causes the God rays to evoke a kind of a mood about the image. There's a nice balance of the rays emanating from the 1/3 to 1/4 position, depending which way you're looking. Also, there's a nice kind of 3-part section to the photo, bottom to the top. I think it has a nice moody effect to it. I think it's well done.
And the artist is Jonathan Beth. Next is China Gold.
Very cool photo and obvious that wherever it was taken, they obviously take great pride in keeping their floors clean. The title very apropos, given the location, but also the wonderful golden hues throughout the image. I really like the cool blue contrast on the left with those warm golden hues. There's a lot to look at in here, and yet it all sort of fits together. a nice composition, leading lines on the left as well as leading lines on the top and bottom, taking you to those great black silhouettes. Very nicely done.
The artist is Eric Lindberg. Next, After the Rains.
I think this is a very good photo representing reflections. Often a critique is not to center an image, but here it is divided in two at the horizontal center, which is okay for a reflected image. The most interesting part of the image, though, I think, is the boy on the right. His stance with his foot lifted, leg lifted, and apparently he looks sharper as opposed to his reflection on the lower part of the image. But this largeness of the boy, to me, balances against the two spires on the left side. But even more than that, his brightness and larger size gives to what might be just a nice reflection photo, a sense of, it kind of comes alive with the boy in the photo. And that my only minor thought is to maybe tone down a little bit the white area in the top middle, just to the left of the boy. It's a little bright there, but it's not very nicely done.
And the artist is Eric Lindberg. Next is Regulator Reflection.
Well, to be honest, I really didn't know what to make of this photo. Obviously, the photographer did everything to bring our focus to the center of the image, including that extremely bright white vignetting on the exterior. But I'm not sure I know why I kept looking at it and thinking maybe I was missing something in the category or just in the photograph in general. That said, the golden light on the pendulum is nice, and the shadowed lettering in the back adds some interest to the photo. Perhaps this photo just falls clearly in the category of to each their own. I know I have taken a lot of those.
And the artist is Jimmy Marchio. And last one in the category is Untitled.
I think this is a very well exposed and well focused photograph, and has a nice depth of field from the shoreline right in front of you all the way to the back. And the silos and the solar panels, they're all in good focus. And I think this use of a black and white image for this type of kind of ag industrial photo is very nice usage of the black and white format. I'm not sure about the open space at the very top and to the right of the solar panels. I think myself, I might lose about 15% of the top just to make it more of a 16:9, which I could see, displaying very well in different spaces, or both the top and to the right, maybe 15%, I think might give a little more focus on it.
And thank you, because the artist is me. So thanks, David, for that, for that advice. Next up, we have our abstract category. First is Eucalyptus Bark.
Something is gone wrong.
Oh, do you have a different title on?
I'm supposed to be up and I do not.
Did one of you do this one?
Did you do, what's the first one you did in abstract?
The one after this one.
Oh, the one called Graceful Flow?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Uh-oh.
Dun-
We're screwed.
We're screwed because you didn't do this one?
Well, we're screwed. We didn't do this one. We're screwed
Because you did all the ones that I did. Well, we'll punt on this one. You want to punt?
We don't need the pun. I'll do it. I had some really nice things to say about the next one. I'm sorry, folks. We even corresponded twice to keep this from happening, and somehow it happened. I don't know. Yeah, eucalyptus. It is an abstract image, which sometimes is a challenge in this category. We see some that aren't really abstract, but I like abstract images that are abstract and yet are somewhat identifiable as what we're looking at. For those of us familiar with eucalyptus and eucalyptus bark, I could tell that's what this is. Really nice color palette, really pretty shades of blue and turquoise blending with those light shades of orange, kind of salmon colors in there. A little bright, particularly at the bottom. I would probably go for a little more contrast. Bring down the highlights a little bit, but all in all, pretty pleasing abstract image.
Sorry
Yeah.
about that. Artist is June Anderson.
I don't have anything to add to that.
So,
Go stereo mode for the next one.
well, the next one is Graceful Flow, and I don't know which one of you is doing this one.
Well,
Is that David? Are you?
well, I'll start with this one.
Well, we
Okay.
don't have time to do two of every one, but. boy,
No,
Yeah.
we'll try to
But
do
if
it
you have some
quickly.
nice things to
But
say,
oh
I'd wanna
boy,
see it.
we did about 50 photos each or so of the same
Oh,
ones.
no.
So,
Oh, boy.
any rate, I think this one has a nice balance to the viewer's eye, which brings you to the center. The exposure and the balance are very good. The sharpness and the water movement was pleasing without being too slow. My only thought for the abstract category, this was more of identifiable photo. If you look at the dictionary, abstract says relating to or denoting art that does not attempt to represent external reality, but rather seeks to achieve its effect using shapes, colors, and textures. So I think just because of the fact that I can see what it is, it doesn't fit as well for me in the abstract category.
And I had made that exact same summary comment on the photo.
Did
Hey.
you want to, was there anything else you wanted to say though, Tom? I'll give you a dispensation on this one.
No, we don't, we're gonna be ad-libbing on the ones we didn't.
Yeah,
we
Do you
didn't-
guys
we
want,
didn't have time.
you want to do like two each? So one of
No,
you, so you,
well, we'll figure it out.
We'll
okay,
figure it out.
I'll let you guys do that. All right, so that was Jonathan Beth. And next we have Purple Haze.
And I will go. Boy, I submitted one in the abstract category last year, I think almost just like this. This is garnet sand, I guarantee you, on a beach somewhere. And really pretty abstract shot. I identify it as garnet sand because I took one much like it. Otherwise, totally abstract, I would think to most folks, and probably not recognize what it is. Saturation to me is a little over the top. That blue, I don't know why the sand would be blue like that. But since it is abstract, the artist has every right to do what they want to do with the color saturation and contrast. It probably did make it a more interesting photo than mine last year because of the color contrast going on. The color of the garnet sand itself is actually pretty close to natural. So probably a little bit on the cool side from my perspective with those blues. But I like the photo. It's a really nice abstract image.
I actually like it quite a bit. You know, I didn't write about this one, but one of the nice things that I'm not a great abstract photographer, but abstract is, it has a balance to it. It has a flow to it with the way the lines lead. And one of the fun parts about abstract is I see a Pontiac Indian head in the purple. I see a ghost below him over here. And it's kind of a fun image.
And the artist is Ray Vallone. Next is Artist Palette.
We both did it, but go,
Okay,
but go for it.
I think this is a nicely flowing abstract. I like that the viewer's eye is led from the upper left to down to the middle and then to the right. I enjoy the slightly diagonal uprise below that leading to the right. And I like the symmetry of the lines and the patterns. I thought it worked fairly well.
I'll just add, I thought that the gradual color changes from left to right, the vertical and horizontal lines converging on the colored wall all make a very creative abstract image. Took me a while to figure out what it was, and then I realized that's graffiti on the far left. So we're probably into the tunnels up at,
Yeah,
by Donner
probably.
Pass.
Probably.
And the artist is Laura Greenman. And last in the category is Bubbles.
neither of us did this, and I'll take a crack at it. This could be an astro photograph almost, looking out into space. That said, it's just to me not enough going on. It's interesting. My eye gets obviously drawn to those few really bright areas, and then it really gets out of focus towards the top as well. If you're going to do these sort of bubble images, and I do a fair number of them, you want them to be pretty crisp usually. I'd probably crop top part at least down to where that really bright area on the left is gone completely. And I'd probably clone out that super bright one in the middle. I think zoomed in, there may be some more interesting stuff going on in there between those little white flecks, the little lines and the bubbles. But it's all sort of lost to me in the size of this image.
I think I would agree with Tom. I like the zoomed in portion of that middle lower third
Yep.
where the bubbles are a little clear. I could kind of see that being the whole image. And give you a little bit more, I guess, for somebody, the viewer needs to find somebody to latch onto. And there's so much in here, but in that section, I find that really interesting. Anyway.
And the artist is Jimmy Marchio. All right, moving into the architecture category, we just have a few entries this time. First would
mine?
be
I'll take this one.
All right.
stepping into Adobe.
I'll go first on this one. First of all, I really like these simple but striking images like this in architecture rather than real busy. Wonderful composition with, I think, perfect technical execution, capturing the subtle changes in texture and color of the Adobe, and that vivid contrast with the concrete stairs is really wonderful. Having lived in Arizona and New Mexico, I've taken quite a few photos of Adobe walls, and I'd be very proud to have taken this one. I have no other constructive suggestions to add. David might.
I love the 3D feel of the diagonal lines and shapes. You know, you notice the wall on the going from the bottom right to the left, and then the wall behind that has a very dimensional feel, while the back wall kind of recedes into the background. And I think this is creates a nice depth of field with the sharpness of the foreground walls to the softer bokeh type of effect of the background walls, and the fact that the stairs are kind of leading up, but they don't leave the image, keeps your eye in it. I think I'd love this photo.
Me
And
too.
The artist is Ingrid Lockhart.
Nice job, Ingrid.
Next is Stairway to Where.
You want to take that one?
Okay. You know, the nice part about this one is that it has a lot of depth to it, because it starts with you at that first step, taking you all the way to the top. And there's this bright part at the top, which, you know, that's the brightest part of the image, often takes your eye there. I think the only thing that I like the diagonal lines of from the left of the handrail going up and to the right leading up to the top. Yeah.
And the artist is Patricia Levitan. Next is the Atrium 2.
I'll go. Well, lots of interesting geometric shapes and patterns going on in here, obviously. All those leading lines on the bottom and the left direct the eye to the main attraction of the skylight at the top, which to my eye is overly bright and a bit blown out, resulting in the patterns within the skylight, which would otherwise be interesting, to be nearly impossible to see. I think if you could bring down the exposure highlights in that skylight, perhaps add a bit of vignetting to the overall scene to further direct the eye that direction, it would greatly improve the photo.
The artist is David Nelson.
I think the only, one comment on this one, that I agree with what Tom said, but I'd also like to have a little more contrast, dark to light contrast. I think it would add a little bit more mystery to it. And other than that, I agree with Tom.
Okay, thank you. It is fun to hear from both of you. I will say, like, just in the interest of time, we'll probably, you guys could just do one, to
Well-
each one take
Yeah.
just
Well,
one person per photo.
I think if we could just add one sentence, if we have one, that would be fine, sticking to the time. But you know better than I.
Okay, well, I'll just keep an eye on the time. And,
Okay.
all right, moving into birds. First up is emerald toucanet.
Oh, so is it, wonderful shot. There's very little to argue about with this one. The background does not, compete with the bird at all. The bird's eye is in focus, the most important part. The whole rest of it is, I think it's simplistic, which really leads to nice focus on the bird. I mean, there's nothing to argue about with the bird. Color, composition, everything looks pretty well. There's a little splotchiness to some of the background. I'm not sure what that's from. That's my only thought on it.
And the artist is Ed Sylvester. Next is boat build heron, Costa Rica.
I'll take that one. Nice portrait of a rather fascinating looking tropical bird. I would say from a technical standpoint, it's just okay. Certainly less than tack sharpness, not like compared to that previous photo, for instance. And there's also a fair amount of noise in the photo, particularly if you zoom in. On the positive side, the bird was caught in rather good light, and we see some catch light in the eye, which is always nice. Some may disagree, but I find the vignetting in this one to be overdone to the point of being distracting. Thanks for sharing this cool, unusual bird with us.
I had the same thought on the vignetting. I think it was a little heavy-handed, but this is obviously a crop. The hard part about these kinds of shots is, this background. If you could move to another vantage point where you didn't have so much to compete with it, it'd be, it would come up much nicer.
And the artist is Ed Sylvester. Next is Little Bee Eater, Serengeti National Park.
I turn to ad lib. I take it. First of all, I always like that soft, I suppose to the previous photo that David made a comment on. The soft bokeh background really is very nice. It's attractive. With actually a little bit of interest going on with the out of focus branches and leaves. But ultimately, the prize is that cool little bee eater, which to my eye, again, having not seen his on my monitor at home, I couldn't swear to the sharpness like I usually try to look at. But from here, it looks to be quite sharp. It looks to be in good focus, good light. The eye looks good. Maybe just a little bit of catch light in there. Good pose. I don't find the branches distracting, which sometimes happens, the ones in the foreground. That one splotch of yellow at the bottom, one could argue that it kind of matches the throat of the bee eater and maybe adds some interest. On the other hand, my eye keeps going down there. I find it a little bit distracting. It might even be worth just cropping. I mean, it's a long vertical image. It might be worth just cropping above that yellow splotch rather than worried about cloning it out. Otherwise, real pretty little bird shot. Thanks.
The artist is Ann Westling. Next is, I hope I pronounced this right, Affiliated in the Rain.
Yeah, I love the sharpness of this bird against the background and the capture of it. I love the pose because it has a kind of an action setting to it. He looks like he was just about to take off. And that, kind of brings the viewer into, oh, I'm there, I'm waiting for him to take off. Unfortunately, that band, that vertical band behind it, takes the viewer's eye away from the bird. And I just want to make one little comment here. There's the comments that we make here as critiquing for the Camera Club. A lot of these things you can modify in post-processing. But if we were a judge for a contest, we couldn't do those things. You can't be, changing the photo for that. So there's kind of two ways to look at it. Strict interpretation for contests and for the sake of what we show here as nice art, Anyway.
The artist is Brian Dunbar. Next is excellent, regrettable.
You want to ad lib one?
Yeah, all right. Great shot. I mean, the eyes are sharp. There's an action going on, and so often, we see these birds with nothing happening, and here's one with something in its mouth. I really enjoyed it. The feathers, even the fine feathers, are sharp. But I find that the little dots, especially on those leaves, when I first look at it, I see those right away. So if those weren't there, I think it would be even stronger.
The artist is Ray Valone. Next is The Eyes Have It.
Yes, they certainly do. A very well executed photo, excellent sharpness throughout, most of the owl's head and body. A really terrific exposure, especially on those striking red eyes and that incredible color. The soft background really sets off the main subject very well. Perhaps just a bit of vignetting could help in that regard. My eye was drawn a bit too much to that bright area in the upper right-hand corner, which seems unnecessary and very easily cloned out, which would improve the image. An impressive owl photo, especially if it's captured in the wild, and perhaps it was not, but that's not necessary here.
I do have one comment to tie on to what Tom said about the bright spot at the top. I was wondering if the photographer had room to move down a little bit to shoot, or let's see, wait a minute. No, it's the other way, huh? It'd be moving up. Forget it. Forget what I said. Moment of weakness.
And the artist is Lori Woodhall. Next is Bringing in the Nesting Material.
Oh, my turn?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is beautiful. I'm seeing it for the first time, sadly, but what a tricky exposure, first off. That bright white sky with a white bird against the white sky. All sorts of things could go wrong there. And yet it works. And I'm looking at that wing spread out on the left. It's fabulous. From what I could tell, crisp, sharp focus. Those roseate spoonbills, I believe they are in the background, are really cool. The individual portrait of just that egret would be wonderful, but some might find the spoonbills distracting. I don't at all. I think they add a wonderful element, except maybe the one in the lower left. The two up top, I think, are great. The branches are fine. That one that's sort of just sitting there in the middle bottom could be cloned out, I think, very effectively. Is it a little tight? And i.e., are the claws, the feet of the egret not fully there? Yeah, just a little more room on the bottom there. But I doubt that was a crop. It's probably was that way in the original photograph. So there's only so much you can do. And then, of course, the bird carrying some nesting material just adds another element of interest to what's really a cool nature photograph, but also beautiful art.
Artist is Janice Rosner. Next is Egg Bandit.
This has excellent exposure.
Excellent.
Excellent, yes, excellent exposure. You caught that. And capture of this theft in progress. I can't find any better focus or depth of field than that's in this shot. Well, my only thoughts were the little bright white part in the upper right and above the nest in the middle, and then the leaf on the bottom. They caught my eye a little, but and I was wondering if it was a square format, it would have eliminated that bottom left leaf. You still would have had to do a little bit with the two upper patches, but the photo is so highly detailed and beautiful, hard to argue with.
The artist is Bill Wages. Next is Ketchikan Eagle Family.
This
Your turn, I think.
My turn? Okay. It's always nice to catch one of these guys, to catch two of these guys, but to catch four of them is a real prize. And the photographer didn't blow really. I don't think I thought on the screen when I looked at this, initially, that the white might have been blown up, but they look pretty good. I don't know what I would do with this other than, I might just kind of crop in a little bit more because the subject there, it's so wonderful to see the four birds together.
The artist is Paul King. And next we have preening.
Oh, boy, just when you start to think that you've seen enough egret shots, you get one that really grabs your attention. We've had two in this group today. I love this sort of lighting with the dark background and beautifully illuminated subject. That sort of lighting can create some challenging exposure conditions, but for the most part, the photographer handled it quite well here. There are some areas on the left side of the egret that are a bit blown out. Difficult to avoid that to some degree sometimes. I'm not sure if you could bring those down a little bit. If you can, it'd be worth trying. The bird's pose is elegant and those wispy feathers are perfect. A truly lovely egret photo.
And the artist is Anita Duprat. And last one in the category, Mr. and Mrs.
All
And
right,
I
I'll
think
take,
all right,
you take
go
this
ahead.
one?
Well, I think it's my turn to ad lib.
Oh,
I think-
oh.
I think we're alternating on the ad libs.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Let's see. Well, quail are beautiful as it is, and to find the two of them together like that, one of each gender is just a cool shot in itself. Do I like the fact that it's on a wooden beam as opposed to like in a more natural setting? No, obviously, but would I take this? Definitely. The focus looks good, a little bit of catch light in both birds. Quite a bit of noise going on in the background. Almost looks like I'm looking through dirty glass back there, but I guess it's just a noise in the image. A little bright, that line at the top of the wooden beam is really blown out, particularly on the left, and similarly on the far left face of the quail on the left. But in general, pretty good exposure, nice clarity on the birds, and a real pretty pose. So good shot.
And the artist is Eleni Prusa. Now we're moving into the fauna category. First is cuttlefish Maldives.
All right, I had this one. So are we back? If I had this one, Tom?
Probably not. We'd had to just make a little adjustment because in
all right.
fauna, you had one in fauna. We may, we'll see. Maybe,
Well, anyway,
maybe we are.
cuttlefish.
That'd be great.
Excellent photo. Great. I love the diagonal lines of the two cuttlefish. The eyes are sharp. They both have great lighting on them. Good choice of aperture. The background, the little pebbles, are nicely out of focus. Nothing to fault here except that this photo wasn't mine.
And the artist is Mark Davis. Next is three-toed sloth.
A charming portrait of a truly unique animal. There are some technical issues, some of which may strictly be a function of the equipment limitations that the photographer was dealing with. The focus is definitely a bit soft throughout the entire image, which is most noticeable to me on the sloth's face, which is really the star of the show. The shadowing and the focus keep us from fully appreciating that friendly, what looks to be a friendly smile on the sloth. The overall gray tones of the entire image don't really do the main subject justice, but I understand, particularly in the wild, we sometimes have to work with what nature gives us. And the only real break from that gray is the very bright, distracting white area at the top. Despite those concerns, a fun sloth photo.
In defense of the photographer, I think it's really hard to get pictures of sloths that aren't in these conditions. Yeah, so I understand that.
It's now. The artist is Gary Emanuel. Next is seldom is heard a discouraging word.
That's me?
Do you have that?
Yeah, I have it.
Good.
I think we're on, well,
We-
whatever.
We'll find out.
We'll find out. Okay. Fantastic action shot. Everything as good as you can get. The focus, the shutter speed, the depth of field, the angle of the view is great. You can see that the horse's head behind. And, somehow in this one, I don't know. It looks like it's centered, but it's a little bit, a hair more on the right. And because it looks like it wants to be centered, I'd like to center it, with just a smidgen off the right. But this photo is great. Wonderful shot.
Yeah, I did not review this photo, but I looked at it at home just because it caught my eye and I zoomed in real tight on the zebra's face and all. It's a really cool action photo.
And the artist is Anne Westling. Next up, cheetah portrait.
Well, hello there, cheetah. How can you not love that beautiful image of a beautiful animal? Fully framed in soft, lightly shadowed green, the white, cream, and golden hues of the cheetah are in perfect contrast with its background. There's good focus on the animal's body with the head nicely positioned against the soft, blurred background. And of course, there are those wonderful enigmatic eyes. Are they sleepy, intense? That to me, they actually, when I zoomed in, they look a bit intoxicated. So I don't know what they're chewing on out there in the Tanzania, but some might ask for a bit more vignetting. I could think of one person with this type of direct center subject composition, but the green framing does the job nicely for me. So thanks for sharing.
And the artist is, excuse me, David Wong.
Shocked.
Next up is You Look This Way and I Will Look That Way.
Now I have this one.
Keep going.
All right. This is an absolutely gorgeous and humorous shot of this female impala with this oxpecker companion on the back of her head. It's as sharp as you can get, and it has beautiful bokeh. Ordinarily, I might not have included the little leaf on the right, but in this case, I think it helps stop your eye from going off of there out of the frame. I guess this is what you get when you have a nice big 400 f.2 lens, Bill. But I'm not sure, you didn't shoot it at 2.8, did you?
Yeah, it's easy.
Did you? It was 2.8. I mean, this is what you get.
By the way, I have that same comment down, by the way.
Yeah, this is
And a
what you,
$10,000 camera.
this is not fair to all the rest of us, Bill.
And the artist is Bill Wages. I think she really likes me.
Okay, I'll do that one. Really a great action photo and well done technically. You really have to zoom in to see the wonderful facial expressions on these two lovers, friends, competitors, I'm not sure. In fact, the facial expressions are so great, particularly that smushed one on the left, that I almost feel like if you want to crop tighter to see them, but you'd be losing too much, I think, of the rest of the photo. The rest of the photo around the animals is really just plain pretty with that orange rust colored behind the surrounding the horses, beautiful golden transitioning to the distant hills. I really like the squarish crop, but wonder if more room on the right and at the bottom would have been possible. If so, I believe it would improve an already lovely image.
And the artist is Brian Dunbar. And next is Elephant Close-Up.
I think we're on unless you don't, I have this one.
Go for it.
Okay, elephant close. Great portrait of the elephant. And the crop works well with the tusk, just the tusk and the eyes. Though you don't see more of the elephant, but there's no distracting background to have to think about. I wish for maybe a little bit more shadow development in the area of the eyes, or it's a little dark. I feel like you can pull up a little bit more. I like the centered cropping on this. It's a nice different presentation of an elephant.
The artist is Desert Powell. And finally, Move On Over.
Another outstanding wildlife photo of the kind our club, I believe, is rightfully becoming renowned. When this photo first pops up, it's almost startling, as if it seems these bison are heading directly at the viewer, and presumably they were heading directly at the photographer. The relatively shallow depth of field really works for me in this image. Brings immediate attention front and center to the center bowl. And the other two being clearly out of overall composition are part of the overall composition, but also clearly secondary to the main guy in the middle. Speaking of front and center, I wondered about the room on the right versus the left. Perhaps a bit more crop on the right, perhaps not. And of course, some would suggest that this type of center view could benefit from some vignetting. I suspect the photographer considered that and decided against it.
And the artist is Anita Duprat. Flora category, just one entry here. How the table turns.
Well, I do have this one.
Good.
This is a wonderful shot. I suppose it's Table Mountain. The colors are exposed just right. I like that there is a slight diagonal line going up with in the middle of the rocks. Maybe it would be a little bit more interesting if it wasn't quite so centered with that diagonal line. But if you did any cropping, then that yellow patch on the right would get cut. So maybe this is the way it should be. I think the only thing I might do, and I was looking at my monitor, is I might just tone down that bright yellow patch on the right, just a slight bit. That one bright yellow patch kind of balances off that whole mass of plateau colors on the left. I think this is a nice shot.
And the artist is Allison Kalt. Next, we have natural landscape, and first is Zabriskie Point, Death Valley, 2023.
Time for the oohs and ahs from the audience. A spectacular photo from an often photographed area, which I've been doing numerous times myself, but taken from a different perspective. Having been there before, if you take a moment to get oriented, you'll see where most folks go, which is in those upper right. You'll see a little wall up on the side up there. That's the real Zabriskie Point. That's where most folks go to. But this person found a really, I think, a much more interesting perspective looking down that white wash on the bottom there. I think really adds a lot of interest to the photo, and all the more so as it flows and joins in with that much darker, almost black drainage directly working, and then that drainage following that one down is heading right towards the setting sun. All those elements work really well for me. Shooting directly towards the setting sun often is difficult. Still, the photographer managed to handle the exposure on the darker foreground hills very well, while not totally blowing out details in the sky. And of course, those wonderful clouds further enhance the view. Fantastic landscape, and certainly one that is print-worthy, in my opinion.
And the artist is Fred Finney. Next, Mount Whitney Touching Moon.
This one is nicely photographed at the right time of day, because it's not shot at night when you can, so it's shot in late enough the day that you can make out the moon and you can see the mountains. The moon is nicely juxtaposition against the rock with having a interesting contrast. Unfortunately, on my monitor at home, when I looked at the moon, it wasn't as sharp as the rocks. I'm guessing maybe it was the photographer might have used a slow enough shutter speed to get the rocks properly exposed, but I think it was a little bit of motion on the moon from what I'm just guessing.
And the artist is John Sievert. Next is natural art.
This is simplicity personified, and the type of photo I love to look at and love to take. A big fan of these sorts of images where nature has added an artistic touch to a landscape scene. Of course, requiring the photographer to, one, see it, and two, frame it and expose it properly, all of which is done perfectly here. I have no constructive criticism to add, but would take this opportunity to point out how difficult it is each month to choose a favorite photo in each category, especially when they are so diverse as the grand Zabriskie Point scene to one with some simple elegance like this one in the same category.
And the artist is Dave McClellan. Next is Garden of the Gods, Colorado Springs.
So this one has wonderful color. It's got great focus. I like the little rim, the rim lighting that pops the mountains off from the background. There's a very nice depth of field to all of this. The only thing that I would like a little more, slightly more shadow development in the dark areas of the trees at the bottom. And maybe a little less of the left side, as the buildings and the town in the distant isn't really the story here. The story are these beautiful rocks and the colors. So that's my only thought on this one. Nice photo.
The artist is Ingrid Lockhart. Next is the moment of ectochrome perfection.
Another great example of beauty in simplicity. This one looked much nicer at home on the monitor. It's because of the subtle color tones. In fact, my note says, note the wonderful gradation of soft color as the eye moves from the left to the right side of the photo, broken only by that perfect shaft of white, long exposed water stream. When I see photos like this, I sometimes wonder how many people would walk right by this beautiful scene without so much as a second glance. If you need a perfect example of what Dorothea Lange meant when she said a camera is an instrument that teaches you to see without a camera, this is it.
And the artist is Chris Schiller. Next, it looks like the file name didn't come through if there was one, so I'm not going to read all those numbers, but I'm going to let you go for it.
Well, this is a nice, there's some nice light in the sky in this view of Nevada City. Unfortunately, this category is natural landscape. And I think this doesn't belong in this category. I hate to be so critical of it in that respect, but the only other thing is, it'd be nice if you time it so that the brake lights weren't the brightest part in that street scene down below. Other than that, I don't have any other comments.
And the artist is Angela Apostol. Next is South Yuba Fury.
We see a fair number of long exposure Yuba River photos in the club. This one holds its own and then some. A strong sense of dynamic motion, which has perfectly captured those beautiful flowing lines and whitewater splashes among the green flowing lines. Excellent technical aspects to this photo, good focus, exposure, and composition. Very well done.
The artist is George Pelpel. Next is Montañas and Fuego.
I think this is a beautiful contrast of the storm clouds against the sunlit mountains with their wonderful color. The photographer doesn't confuse the viewer at all, as the sky is the dominant feature. He or she wants you to see this as the story. And I think too often photographers confuse viewers by showing lots of different elements and letting the viewer decide what they wanted to feature. But here, the photo shows the major element that pops out with colorful mountains. I mean, pops out because of the slim, colorful mountains at the bottom that just go to emphasize the difference, and I have this less is more. Nice shot.
The artist is Eric Engels. Next is Balance at Badwater Basin.
Well, it's good to see that someone in the club got down to Death Valley during I assume this year's ephemeral lake event. This is a moody photo that I found myself enjoying more the longer I looked at it. It doesn't smack you in the face like some of the other landscape shots we've seen, but it more gradually draws you in. It's a good example of including people in a landscape scene to give it context and additional elements of interest. I know that cropping out a fair amount of the top sky would result in a very elongated, almost panoramic shaped photo. But that said, the sky to me is adding very little, and I would suggest experimenting with some additional cropping. As an aside, this photo would have fit nicely in this month's assigned category of reflection.
And the artist is Emily Weissman. Next is Canyonlands National Park.
This is great cropping in this photo. It makes it really memorable by showing the nearby cliffs on the right with the person on the right split with the faraway plateau on the left. The viewer gets a tremendous sense of scale by, seeing it from the cliffs on the right to the distant plateaus on the left side. It's very nicely focused. The exposure is spot on, and I love the depth of field. And the road below leads the eye. Very, very nicely done.
And the artist is Gary Emanuel. We're just a little over halfway there, everybody.
Oh, yeah.
All right,
Oh.
into night photography. First is Factory Butte Pano.
This is the Milky Way on Mars, I think, right? It should be, that's what it looks like. Fascinating image of an otherworldly landscape. The sharpness is okay, if a bit soft, especially in the night sky. We see quite a few Milky Way pics on the club and in general on the internet nowadays. And the key to me of having one stand out is often the foreground elements. The rear or the silhouette of Factory Butte itself serves well as additional element. But for me, the entire lower 60% of this image is just too devoid of interest. Given that it is already a pano, I can see how cropping any more from the bottom would be a concern. But playing around with different crops, I found that some tighter ones much more compelling, perhaps even at the expense of losing the far left end portion of the Milky Way arch. It is worth considering really tightening that crop around Factory Butte and bringing in much from the bottom and the left. Otherwise, a really cool night shot.
And the artist is John Sievert. Next is Starry Night over the Yuba.
This is a very nice photo with the photographer shooting at the right time of day to capture both the starry skies and the landscape of the Yuba. It has a very nice depth with the closeness of the river starting at the bottom, and it has three different points: the river and the rocks, the middle ground, and the sky. I think my only wish it was a little bit more shadow development in the middle area with all the trees, but nicely done photo.
And the artist is Allison Kalt. Next is McKay Falls at night.
Another very pretty night scene and dark enough that I can't read my notes. As is typical with many of these night scenes, there's a softness in the sky sharpness and with less than pinprick stars, but that's a minor quibble, and I know how difficult that is to get. The star of the show really is the lovely long exposure of the waterfalls, which are nicely exposed with focus. The overall scene, excuse me, there we go, thank you. The overall scene feels a bit dark to me. Yes, I know it's night photography. But a bit more detail in the rocks surrounding the falls might add some additional interest. But all in all, a nice night shot.
And the artist is Eric Engels. And last one in the category, El Pulpo Magnifico in 2023.
I wouldn't want to wake up to this wonderfully detailed and exposed shot. What a nightmare. Everything is spot on in this shot. And yes, even for mechanical eyes, the eyes have to be in focus. The flames that give you a good feeling for with the exposure for the right shutter speed and exposure. I think it's a fascinating photo. I don't know if I want to hang it in front of my wall, but it's just fascinating. Nicely done.
And the artist is Douglas Hooper. Moving into the people category, first is Contemplating Van Gogh.
Well, this is different for people shot. My first thought was to wonder how much advanced planning went into this photo. For example, the jacket, the specifically matching the Van Gogh image, the wonderful placement of the woman to get that mirrored corner, all with great side lighting on the subject herself. The technical aspects are all well done. Nice colors throughout, good use of vignetting, I thought. My eye keeps going to the background, the artwork, with the woman being very secondary to the overall image. There's no particular emotion with the woman. To me, the best people pictures capture some element of human emotion. Feels more posed to me. The image would still be compelling and colorful if it was a chair instead of a woman there, which is fine, but left me wondering if the photo would be better suited in our color category rather than the people category, but a very well executed and attractively colorful photo.
The artist is Lori Woodhull. Next is Solo.
I thought this photo really transports the viewer to a sense of reality. You know, it feels like it feels so real. The light coming down the stairway seems to be making a story of the violin case being open, the artist, asking for money. The player doesn't look at the photographer and position above the violin case is very good story book positioning. My only thought was a little bit more shadow development on the person himself, but wonderfully realistic and meaningful photo.
The artist is Mark Rideout. Next is Maria Rockinet.
We see many great concert images in our club, which I think is both a tribute to the photographers and also a tribute to our community. This is another really good one. It's well exposed, the subject standing out nicely against that dark background. I like the soft light coming from the left on her ponytail. That was particularly attractive. The light is a bit harsh on parts of her face and hands, but that is the nature of spotlighting at concerts. The lack of sharpness on her arm, hand, and tambourine actually enhanced the photo to my eye, adding a sense of dynamic motion. A real highlight for me is in her eyes. There is almost a kind of fierceness in her eyes and her expression. Well done.
The artist is Bob Brandstrom. Next is Sri Lanka Fisherman.
I think this is wonderfully shot with the background and the pole telling you what this person is doing. Yeah. The exposure on the face is well done with that, especially with the hat on. And the eyes have a great expression, and gives the viewer, him looking at the photographer really gives you a connection to the subject here. I think it's an excellent photo, and I love his pose looking over his shoulder. Nicely done.
And the artist is Bernadette Sylvester. Next is Lunar New Year Festival Dancers.
What a fun photo. The flowing motion in the fabric against the dark brick background is wonderfully captured. Although the magenta color is most prominent, note the touch of blue-green on the woman's dress on the left and how it ties in nicely with the old door in the background. But ultimately, this photo is about the women themselves and their very dissimilar facial expressions. Unposed and joyful on the right versus direct and at the photographer with a bit of a demure smile on the left. The faces are so great, I did play with a tighter crop, but all that would come at the expense of some other nice details, such as the lovely skirt on the woman on the right. Is it a little tight on the left and right, especially where the skirt is cut off? Perhaps, but broadening out would further reduce the facial impact. Good use of vignetting on an otherwise excellent photo.
And the artist is Paul King. And last one in the category, Men in the Blizzard.
Oh, here's a shot where nothing is sharp, there are no eyes, and the contrast is low. But the story, the photograph tells you the story. Never mind the noisy trees and the blur. The photographer accomplishes the story knowing what he accomplishes knowing what the photograph did not need. Well done. Do you feel cold?
And the artist is Janice Rosner. Moving into photojournalism, I Can Touch a Dragon.
It's unusual to critique back-to-back photos taken on the same day, but that's the case for me here. My first impression, bright colors. Next, what a great array of faces. If you take time and just scan around this shot, particularly looking at all the different faces of the kids, so it's really wonderful. Kids on shoulders, kids with beautiful clothing, like the girl in the front, little kid in blue, not sure what to make of this big purple thing. This photo captures the spirit of the day very well. Would I crop that partial boy's face on the far left? I don't think so. Nicely done.
And the artist is Natalia Kominoto. Next, again, the file name either didn't come through or something happened. So that's what it is.
I think this is a story very nicely told. The biggest balloon getting attention due to its brightness and position in the photo is the one at the very top. The streaking clouds moving upwards with the bright balloon all rising from the darker bottom suggests this whole upward movement of the viewer from the darker bottom to the brighter top, and things are rising. I think it works well.
The artist is Angela Apostol. And finally, Mardi Gras Parade Spectators.
Nevada City is providing quite the venue for photojournalism folks and for people pictures. And this one probably fits the people category better from my perspective, with the real focus and subject being the little girl and not much of a photojournalism story, in my opinion. From a photojournalism standpoint, there isn't much of a story here, but the girl's outfit and expression really make the picture. There are some technical issues, and I suspect this is probably a phone image. I don't know that. It seems to have some aberrations caused by attempts at over sharpening. From a crop standpoint, it would be good to avoid just the top of the bald head at the bottom. The little girl in her fancy dress are really what keep this as a fun photo.
And the artist is Jerry Thomas. Got a couple in travel. First one is Maasai Shepherd Boy, Northern Tanzania.
So this is a wonderful storytelling shot of the young Maasai boy by himself. The emptiness of his young Maasai boy's life. They are set out here to tend to flocks of cattle and to goats. The mountain in the distance is not sharp and there's hazy weather, but the great difference in focus between the sharp image and the boy tells the whole story. No eyes, just a suggestion of the boy gazing out at what, and suggesting or having you ask, what is he thinking? I think just like Edward Hopper, not showing everything leaves the viewers to engage and wonder. I thought this was very well done. I was standing next to this person when they took the shot, and it came out much better than I could have imagined.
And the artist is Bob Brandstrom. And next is Vert Galant Square and the Louvre from the Pont Neuf.
How's that pronunciation, George? Pretty good. To me, this is the quintessential travel photo, unless you happen to live there, I guess, and then you're not traveling. The wide, slightly panoramic view is perfect here, pulling in that tree on the far right and wonderful boats on the far left, but done with minimal distortion looking at the vertical lines on the buildings. The soft evening light adds warmth to the buildings on the right, while the stream of red taillights on the left speak to the coming night. The sky is not so dramatic so as to detract from the scene, but does add just the right amount of painterly touch. I thought perhaps the scene could be brightened up just a bit in the deeply shadowed areas, particularly on the left, but that is apparently not how the photographer wanted to handle the scene, and that is fine by me.
And the artist is George Pell. Next, we have creative fantasy. First is I survived cancer. Yeah.
Right. The creative categories are a little hard for me just because they're so creative. This is a wonderfully colorful, painterly like photo that, you know, where you really get to equate the bright colors with two feelings. One of emotion, I survived in this woman's face, and I'm guessing the rest of it is fire, which is the cancer that she walked through. So it's a wonderfully entertaining photo. I've never gone through this, so great shot.
And the artist is Shelby Cohen. Next is Dahlia Delight.
It's a lovely image in a very creative way to take an otherwise simple dahlia photo and turn it into a printable piece of art. I don't know where the reality ends and the computer imaging begins, and maybe that is why I like it so much. Obviously, the artist worked hard to carefully find the perfect complement of views and just a touch of vignetting. A beautiful image. I wondered about the wrong category only because this creative fantasy really is, this looks a little more like manipulated but realistic to me, but whatever. The very pretty image.
And the artist is Suzanne Hambleton. Next is Fashion Tangle.
I thought this was an artful and creative blend that combines a nice black and white image with some color. It kind of evoked for me some feelings of 50-year-old black and white art genres that combine neon colorful paint strokes. The dark glasses hide the eyes further from the viewer in this photo, and gives it kind of an abstract realism feeling to me. I don't know why I like this, but I do. And it's sharp, has strong contrast, but it's more than just the sum of its parts.
The artist is Douglas Hooper. Next is Are You Ready Yet?
I'm going to say right up front, when you review the photos for voting, take a close look at this photo, zoom in on it and look around. It's beautiful. To me, it takes painterly to a whole nother level, including adding texture to appear as an oil on canvas, but it's so carefully done. Check out that background on the right, the fabulous blending of colors as if on an artist's palette. I assume the birds and what looks to like a bubbling water source were in the original photo. And if so, excuse me, at this cough. And if so, there's only so much you could be done. But for me, that large bubbling area on the lower right is a bit distracting and detracts a bit from the warmer tones of the image. That said, there is a tie from that bubble on the right to the outstretched wing on the upper left, providing some balance in color and tone to the photo. I don't personally do this sort of work, but I would be very proud if this was mine.
And the artist is Kathy Triolo. And next is 1986 Winners Swimming SF USA Gay Games 2.
So this is here is a clear separation of the story from the background. And the three figures are all the story. The background is incidental. The black and white figures kind of make the people into a representation of, I felt like universal people. There are all winners, you know, and with the fist pump and the smile, the story is well told.
And the artist is Shelby Cohen. Manipulated but realistic. First up, High Rise.
Well, this is different. My first impression that this one pushes the limits of this category. Is it realistic? or is it creative fantasy? But there is some wild architecture out there in the world, so who knows? I'd be curious to talk to the photographer about that. Assuming this is an actual photograph or a composite, there is a creative blending of color and angles contrasted against that overly dark sky. As a technical point, there's a large area of digital artifacts or digital merging errors on the area where the buildings come together, where the orange and yellow meet the top there. It's really quite distracting when you look at it on the computer, and you might want to work on cleaning that up. A cool and visually arresting image.
The artist is Jerry Thomas. Next is Impala Boys and Girls Club.
You got this one.
Yeah, I've got it. This is in that same category of manipulated but realistic, and in contrast to the previous image, in this one, I had to look hard to find any manipulation in the photo. It was difficult to find, which I believe is consistent with the intent of the category. You can zoom in on any one of these Impalas and see beauty and grace, and as a cluster, they form an overall wonderful image. I particularly liked how the shorter ones in the middle are protected by the larger ones on either side, presumably young males in the center and older females on the sides, all looking directly at us, at the photographer. The green grasses in the background provide a nice contrast to the warm brown hides of the Impalas. Perhaps a bit more on top than needed, perhaps not. Thanks for sharing this touch of Tanzania with us.
And the artist is David Wong. And next is Voyeur.
So this is a fun shot with this blurry, watery foreground to tell the story of two birds. I'm not really sure that this appears realistic to me, but that's the suggestion of the title. I thought it was artfully constructed. The color palettes work together. I think it's nicely done. I can't imagine doing this. So congratulations.
The artist is Kathy Triolo.
I thought it was hysterical.
All right, into the black and white category. First up is Clouds Starburst.
A very impressive ethereal photo. It's not always easy to get sun rays coming out in all directions like this. Black and white, I think, was a good choice here, in part because that bright blown out area and where the sun is always less of an issue when you do it in black and white than in color. The billowing cloud and tree silhouettes add interest. There are some technical issues. There's some haloing and other aberrations around the trees. And there are some strange lines through the cloud on the far left. But these are relatively minor distractions from an overall nice black and white image.
The artist is Gary Kartstaffner. Next,
I realize it's 9 o'clock. We only have a few more left, and hopefully
We're cruising.
that's true. We are in the home stretch.
yeah.
So this is called Graceful Beauty.
The framing of the statue helps to focus the viewer's eyes. The white color of the statue, brighter than the rest of most of the elements, further focuses your eye. Finally, the extra brightness, white edging of the statue's right side completes the focus on the graceful beauty. I think it's nicely done, black and white.
And the artist is Laura Greenman. Next is Vigil.
A nice, simple, almost minimalist photo. The photographer caught the bird silhouette in an excellent posture. For me, I would have gone all the way with this photo and removed the branch in the lower left completely, coming up from the bottom there. And also would have taken down the remaining branch detail all the way to a black silhouette, giving an image an almost woodblock print feel. Some folks might vignette this scene, but I prefer the black on the harsher white. The square crop works very well. I might even consider taking out the branch on the far right as well and leaving nothing but the center branch with the bird silhouette and with a darkened branch and call it good. Very nice.
Thank you. And the artist is yours truly. And thank you. And the last one in the category is End of the Storm.
The enormity and brightness of the white cloud, the white storm clouds, as compared to the dark starkness of the landscape below, makes this image. The added contrast in the clouds above makes them even more powerful. And this is, I think this is an excellent use of black and white contrast to give power to an image.
And the artist is Dave Arstein. All right, into color. First up is In the Weeds.
I love this. The photographer may have had an internal debate on whether to submit this in the assigned reflection category, or even an abstract for that matter. But in either case, it is a striking color image. If you zoom in, there is a whole lot going on in here that is in a deceptively simple photo, mostly in the bottom 2/3, which then begs the question about the depth of field and the subsequent cropping decision on the upper portion, which is not in focus. I played around with some tighter crops at the top, and the verdict is out for me, perhaps just a little. Good exposure, good sharpness, great color, great eye. As an aside, I always question on my own images like this, whether to clone out some of those, scattered white spots, but they hardly even show up on the screen here, some on the middle upper left there. But beautiful shot, and I think would make a nice work as artwork on a wall.
And the artist is Ellen Davis. Next is Man with a Hat.
All right, we're always told that your eye is drawn to the brightest spot. Not always. Here your eye is drawn to the dark or high contrast in the middle and the center at the bottom, as compared to the rest. The lines converge to the center. Center completes the photographic story. Your eye is not always drawn to the light, and centering is not always a bad idea. Nicely done.
And the artist is Emily Weissman. Next is Perseverance.
Another somewhat minimalist color photo, this one relying on subtle changes in texture and color to add interest. I really wanted to like this image more, but there was too much holding me back. For photos relying so much on texture, they really need to be tack sharp, and this one clearly is not. Similarly, the colors feel more washed out than just soft, with the title characters presumably being the plants being barely noticeable, the Perseverance being the title. I believe a much tighter crop from the top, bottom, and left side, with some work to bring out texture and color changes surrounding and including the plants, would make this a much more effective photo. And a bunch of that black at the bottom could go as well. That said, I believe the photographer exhibited a good eye for spotting a potential photo in an otherwise mundane scene.
And the artist is Ellen Davis. Next up, The Missing Boot.
Well, as opposed to the man with the hat image that we saw, the bright colors here trump everything else. Sorry to use that word. Nothing else matters in this photo except for the blue sign, which kind of balances against the yellow boots. The words are backwards, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference. There's a minimalist story told with color and balance.
And the artist is Mark Rideout. And last one in color is Crab Pot.
Unlike the previous photo I reviewed in this category with the soft colors, this case, the photographer really got their money's worth out of their color saturation and vibrant sliders. Too much so, that's in the eye of the beholder. Certainly, it is a highly effective in having that real red-orange float jump out in contrast with the surrounding blues and greens. It almost seems as if the float is illuminated from within and is glowing from an internal light or heat source. Overall, this is an effective composition with just a touch of interest in the sky to add to the scene, has adequate depth of field to have crisp details on the primary subject with gradual blurring as we move away. Well done.
And the artist is Mike Shea. And we are into the last category, Starting with Buddha at home. This is the phone category.
So here's a story told just by framing. No need to worry about f-stops, shutter speed, just aim and crop. And I think, it shows you how effective the phone can be. I think the only thing I would have done with this one is I probably would have cropped that lower rock out of it to have more focus on the Buddha. The phones are amazing, amazing cameras.
The artist is Morris Freeman. Next is water.
Another minimalist photo, which, let's see, excuse me, a little dark. Effective use of shadow and light to create interest. Such dark shadows and intense metallic reflection present challenges, whereas portions of the faucet are almost unavoidably blown out. Other key elements of the photo are too dark, in my opinion. Most importantly, there is a bee on the end of or wasp hanging from the end of the faucet, apparently trying to access the subject of the title, water. I had to zoom in very closely to see the bee and never did see the water. That little splash of reflective red is quite nice and also could benefit from bringing up the shadows in that area. On the positive side, I really like the brown and black juxtaposition in the background and the graceful flowing curve of the faucet with that nice light on the side. There are elements of a very compelling but simple image in here.
And the artist is Natalia Kominoto. Next is the world outside your door.
So I never would have guessed that this was a phone shot. I mean, the juxtaposition, the framing of the outdoors with just a simple outline of the door frame as compared to the soft light inside with the lamp is just marvelous. It almost looks like you set up a studio shot with your phone. Very nice.
And the artist is Tom Quinn.
No rebuttal on that one.
Next is Winter Puddle.
For those of you who may be familiar with some of my photography, and you may be wondering why David is not critiquing this photo. But no, it's not mine, and I'm happy to see others out there grabbing cool images of oak leaves and ice crystals. Within the limits of phone camera technology, the sharpness here is quite good, with some detail on both the leaf structure and the crystal structure being evident. Composition is well done, if perhaps a bit tight on the lower right. A bit more room over there would also allow a bit more vignetting. One question I had in this photo was the color. The turquoise green just feels jarringly unnatural to my eye, perhaps especially in contrast to the saturated leaf color. But that is an area where I know we all have our personal preferences. All in all, a very pretty winter capture.
And the artist is Dave McClellan. Next is Complex Fire, NCCC 9820.
There's not much I can say about this one. It captures the beauty of the clouds and the development of the fire very well, compared to, it's really the story of the comparison of the clouds and the fire cloud developing with the serenity of the landscape below it. And it really kind of speaks to the fact that it doesn't make a lot of difference sometimes what camera you have. It's the story in your mind, which I think is captured well here by a phone.
The artist is Fred Finney. Next is Ollie watching the rain.
I love the left 3/4 of this photo. Warm, moody light on the somewhat enigmatic pole over there, which maybe manzanita, and I'm not sure, cat climbing pole. I love the light on the cat's tail and the cat's back. And I think if it was darker out the window and we could actually see some of the rain that the cat was allegedly looking at, it would, let's see if I can read this in the dark. It would blend in much better with the rest of the photo. But instead, to my eye, it's all a bit jarring on the upper right, in the upper right side. And the bright, thank you, George. And the bright area becomes the main draw. Even though there is nothing there of particular interest in those unidentifiable bright patterns outside the window. Perhaps toning it way down, adding some warmth and cropping it a bit on that side, perhaps with some vignetting, would bring focus back to the great left side of the image, which also could be lightened up just a bit. Despite these comments, a very nice phone photograph.
And the artist is Patricia Levitan. And last but not least is Old Garage.
So, the elements underneath the tree and framed by the tree are pretty nicely captured. I don't really, for a phone shot, I think that's probably the part that I would have cropped a little bit, because the leaves creeping up to the right and the leaves on top of the horizontal trunk don't add so much to it, because the story is the old garage with the driveway leading up to the old garage. Very nice phone shot. Just, I think a little tighter cropping would fit the story a little better. Nicely done, though.
And the artist is Morris Freeman. And I just want to say thank you again to our critiquers, getting through so many images so well and doing a fair amount of ad-libbing each tonight. Thank you to David and Tom and to all of you for coming.
Yeah, please, before you go, if you have cups, please pick them up and put them in.
David, I'm glad we got synced eventually.
Yeah,
And also
we
a
got
big-
back on.
A big thank you to Craig Warson, who finally's got our audio
It's only 14.
solved for Zoom. So, yeah, thank you for, yeah.
Say hi. He didn't have been